We kick things off with a chilling reality check. There are only 2.4 doctors for every 1,000 souls in this world. While sprinting through the fields, our hero remembers a brutal reality. Japan is ranked a pathetic 5th from the bottom among the 38 nations of the OECD, the very organization meant to be boosting global living standards and growth. He realizes that, as crazy as it sounds, these numbers might actually be a blessing in disguise. Just look at Tanzania, where there's a measly 0.06 doctors for every 1,000 citizens. But then he wonders, what if there's a place even more desperate, where even Tanzania would look like a medical paradise? He skids to a stop as a massive dragon sends a gale screaming past him, forcing him to wonder, what does being a doctor even mean in a world this insane? Fast forward to that night, and our boy finally rolls up to the bar a little behind schedule where, waiting right there, are two familiar faces from his residency days, his old buddies, Okusawa and Yamagishi. It's been ages since the trio grabbed a drink together, and Okusawa is already roasting him for being a total workaholic, while Yamagishi chimes in that just clocking out on time doesn't count as a real vacation. The mood shifts big time when Yamagishi drops the bombshell that a baby is on the way, and Okusawa is absolutely hyped for the news. They erupted into absolute madness, cheering him on with pure, unbridled hype. The whole place erupts into a massive celebration. But the hype hits a wall when Yamagishi drops a total bombshell. Our main man Amami has a huge announcement of his own. His mom drops a massive bombshell that he's being transferred, leaving Okusawa completely frozen in shock. He's being shipped off to Saimajima Clinic, a remote island facility in a village that hasn't seen a doctor in years. And the craziest part? He's expected to pack up and ship out by tomorrow morning. His friends are absolutely stunned, demanding to know why he'd throw away a golden career at a major hospital for this. Amami keeps it simple. There are lives on the line on that island, and someone's got to step up and save them. But right in the middle of their talk, a sudden call from the hospital slams the brakes on everything. She listens intently before springing into action, knowing there's no time to waste. A cirrhosis patient is literally puking blood from a massive esophageal rupture. He barks out orders for 4 units of MAP and demands they prep to stop the bleeding immediately. Snatching up his bag, he tells his crew it's one of his own patients on the line and promises he'll be back the second they're stable. Giving Yamagishi one final shout-out, he bolts out the door to save a life. As he vanishes through the bar doors, Okusawa wonders out loud if Amami's sudden transfer was just the result of some dirty hospital politics. Yamagishi just shakes his head, revealing that the transfer was actually meant for him. But when Amami saw the mess he was in, he stepped up and took the hit himself. Okusawa lets out a heavy sigh, muttering that it's just like Amami to play the martyr and constantly put everyone else first. He points out with a bitter edge that Amami actually hit up a bar just to bail, without even touching a single drop. That's when Yamagishi drops a bombshell. Amami doesn't touch the stuff anymore. He used to be a drinker, but after a dark incident years ago, he swore off the bottle for good. Okusawa just shakes his head again, still hung up on the fact that Amami really ditched the bar without ordering a single drink. He was terrified of the soul-crushing guilt if a patient died on his watch. But Okusawa just sneered and mocked him for having a total hero complex. But behind all that playful roasting, you can tell he's got massive respect for a guy who's always willing to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. Amami storms into the OR with the team already in high gear, catches a quick nod from another doc, and dives straight into the surgery, barking out orders to stop the bleeding. He barks out orders for an emergency EVL, mentally rehearsing the high-stakes procedure used to tie off those ticking time bombs in the veins before they cause a total bloodbath. As the sun rises, we're back in the consultation room where the doctor is breaking down some heavy genetic test results for a mother and her child. The lab results finally drop, exposing a bizarre mutation deep inside the FEC gene. The diagnosis is official. It's a brutal case of hypophosphatemic rickets. You can see the pure dread wash over the mother's face as her world starts to crumble. She stands there in silence, her mind spiraling as she tries to wrap her head around the medical monster attacking her child. This primary hypophosphatemic rickets is basically a massive glitch in the kidneys, where they stop holding onto phosphorus and just flush it all away like it's nothing. Once those phosphorus levels in the blood hit rock bottom, the body starts to break down, leading to the bone-warping agony of rickets. If you're an adult, they give it a different name, osteomalacia. But make no mistake, it's the exact same skeletal nightmare. Whether it's a curse passed down through your bloodline, or just a freak accident of nature, this disease is a tangled mess of genetics and symptoms that's nearly impossible to escape. Amami steps in to ease her mind, explaining that the meds are already working wonders, and the mother finally lets out a massive sigh of relief. In the background, two nurses are whispering as they watch the drama unfold. One of them, a girl with bangs, realizes that Dr. Amami actually pulled another all-nighter. Her co-worker with the ponytail nods, confirming he never even went home. He stayed late just to make sure a patient's bleeding was completely under control. The first nurse can't believe it, especially since it's his absolute last day at the hospital. But the ponytail nurse explains that Amami insisted on taking care of his patients until his very last second on the clock. She even points out that if it weren't for his sharp eyes, that little girl's mystery fractures would have never been solved. Nana lights up with a massive smile as she showers Amami with thanks, but her mom quickly steps in to remind her to use his proper title, Doctor, and Amami just beams back at them with a look of pure, heartwarming kindness. The nurse with bangs sighs, wishing a saint like him could stay at the university hospital. But her friend knows the cold truth. The good ones never survive in a place this cutthroat. Before heading out, Amami drops the bombshell that it's officially his final day, warning them to never miss a single dose of the meds while the mother bows low in gratitude. Nana waves like a maniac, screaming her final goodbyes as they head out. The mom waves goodbye with a smile, but as they head out, a nurse with bangs mutters that heading to a village with no doctor is basically a one-way ticket to a career graveyard. But before she can get another word out, the ponytail nurse barks for her to get over there. She quickly apologizes and bolts over to assist. Suddenly, a parent calls out to them, showering both nurses with praise for their incredible work. They try to be humble, but he doubles down, insisting that he's the one who owes them everything. Flashing a confident grin, he tells them he'll be back before they even know he's gone. He leaves them with his blessings for now, but the scene quickly shifts to a mummy on a ship, absolutely shredding through the crashing ocean waves. The ocean is absolutely thrashing, and the wind is howling like crazy. Our guy is already doubled over the railing, losing his lunch straight into the abyss. The captain just stands there in total shock, half scolding him and half dying of laughter at the irony. A doctor getting taken down by seasickness the second they hit the water. Now that's a pathetic sight. He yells to ask if Amami even took his seasickness meds, but a ghost-white Amami just groans that he probably puked them right back up, not that they were helping anyway, while the captain can't hear a single word over the thundering roar of the ocean. He barks back for him to speak up, mocking how fragile these doctors really are, before laughing that the seas are especially vicious today. A brutal welcome for a man heading to a place where he'll be the only doctor around. Amami hits the remote island just as a brutal storm and crashing waves slam into his boat. The second his feet touch the dock, the gale force winds nearly blast him right back into the ocean. He's straining to catch every word, but the voices are just a jumbled mess, so feeling the pressure, he tells the mayor that since the village has been without a doctor for ages, he's ready to step up and treat anyone who needs help right now. The mayor and the islanders trade looks before he finally speaks up with a face full of relief. But his accent is so insanely thick, it's almost impossible to understand a single word he's saying. His mom keeps apologizing, explaining he's still a total fish out of water who can't understand a word, while he secretly feels like trash because they went through all this trouble to welcome him in such a brutal storm. He swears to master their dialect in record time, because he knows he can't save lives if he can't even talk to his patients. The mayor beams with a massive grin, giving Amami a rock-solid handshake as he offers the thanks of every single person on the island. The captain just laughs it off and tells the mom to stay calm. But good luck understanding the mayor. His accent is so thick that even the locals are completely lost. The mayor explains that most villages are stranded without any medical help, making Amami's arrival a total miracle. And though they had a massive party planned for him, the storm shut that down real quick. Mom is low-key getting hit right in the feels. He knows there are over 600 villages in Japan left stranded without a single doctor. And since even the government can't fill those spots, he vows to master the local dialect to truly fit in, prompting the captain to laugh and tell him to stop being such a tryhard. With the rain still hammering the island, the mayor tells Amami to get some shut-eye, promising to regroup tomorrow once the storm finally lets up. Mommy thanks the whole group and makes it clear, if anyone starts feeling sick, they better come straight to him. With them finally gone, a heavy silence takes over, leaving nothing but the sound of rain hammering against the wooden walls. Absolutely wiped out, he faceplants onto the cramped bed in the back, his body feeling like lead, and his brain turning to total mush. He mumbles that he's hit his absolute limit, but before he can even shut his eyes, he realizes he's got to master the local lingo first. His eyes lock onto a water bottle sitting on the table, and he debates tossing it in the fridge so it's ice cold for later. The moment he cracks open the fridge, a blinding flash whiteouts the room, and a deafening boom echoes as lightning slams into the building, sending a lethal surge of electricity ripping through the metal frame. His body jerks violently as the massive surge rips through him, and just like that, the lights go out for good. Meanwhile, beneath a sky stained blood red, a carriage thunders down a dusty road as guards ruthlessly drive a line of shackled slaves forward. This massive beast is hauling the carriage forward with everything it's got. Hulking, hooved beasts are huffing and puffing as they trample through the thick muck, tearing up the earth with every step. Hidden among the captives is a young beast girl, looking absolutely drained and on the verge of collapsing from hunger. Her legs buckle and she crashes straight down to her knees. A guard barks out a command for the caravan to freeze, and the driver yanks the reins, bringing the carriage to a screeching halt. The guard locks eyes with the collapsed girl and lets out a nasty snarl. He barks at her to get up and move, but she's completely paralyzed, forcing the merchant to shout from the carriage for his guard, Crane. King squares up to the merchant, ready to jump the second he gets the word. The merchant doesn't even blink as he gives the order to execute the girl on the spot. He makes it clear he has no room for damaged goods, and there's no way he's letting her walk away alive. Crane tries to protest, arguing the girl is a prize catch, but one death stare from the merchant shuts him up instantly, leaving him with no choice but to cave in and nod. He claims he'll finish her off fast to avoid getting blood on the rest of his stock, yanking the beast girl up and dragging her away from the group. She's shaking and sobbing in pure terror, but Crane just scoffs, telling her to blame her own pathetic weakness as he levels his spear for the kill. But just as he's about to swing, the earth starts trembling, and a massive shadow swallows him from behind. Crane whips around just in time to see a massive chimera burst from the shadows, its fangs bared and its eyes burning with pure, unadulterated rage. Total panic hits the guards like a freight train. Crane screams a desperate warning and bolts, telling everyone to run for their lives. Then the chimera lets out a bone-chilling roar that shakes the entire valley. The beast girl is frozen stiff, forced to watch as this massive shadow looms over her. Those predator eyes lock right onto her shaking frame, sensing her every shiver. She lets out a gut-wrenching scream, but the chimera lunges, snatching her up as the whole world descends into pure chaos. Deep in the shadows of the forest, a mother sat huddled against the trunk of a massive tree. He jolted awake, scratching his head in total confusion as he tried to figure out what the heck just happened. He whipped his head around, realizing he had absolutely no clue where he'd ended up. A sudden rustle catches his ear, and he freezes in disbelief as he spots a slime casually slurping from a nearby puddle. He dug his nails into his arm, desperate to wake up from what had to be a dream. But that sharp sting of pain hit him hard, confirming this madness was actually happening. Every one of his senses was screaming the same thing. This was 100% real. This was no dream. It was 100% real. He couldn't tear his eyes away, obsessed with how this creature even functioned and why it looked like it jumped straight out of a video game. But while he's trying to make sense of it all, the slime reached out for the sports drink, and Amami handed it over, looking totally intrigued by what he was doing. He knew instantly this wasn't Saimajima anymore. The whole vibe was just wrong. But before he could even make sense of it, a beast girl literally dropped out of the sky and slammed right into him. He gets slammed into the dirt, and while he's still reeling from the shock, he catches a glimpse of her animal ears. But he started panicking the second he heard her gasping for air, realizing right then that something was seriously wrong. Suddenly, the slime lunges and swallows Amami's head whole, and just as he frantically manages to rip it off, the beast girl's voice trembled with pure terror as she begged him to turn tail and run. He's absolutely floored when out of nowhere her words finally start making perfect sense. He snatched her up in a heartbeat as a gargantuan chimera burst from the tree line, locking eyes with the nightmare in a tense showdown. Terrified, the mother scooped up the injured girl and bolted away at full speed. He loses his footing and slams into the dirt, but just as he looks up, that nightmare chimera is already closing in. He yanks her into the bushes, his mind racing to cook up a last-ditch effort as he snatches his medical pen light. He leaps to his feet and starts screaming at the top of his lungs, frantically waving his light to lure the beast's eyes right toward him. That freakish beast whipped around, locking its eyes right on him. He's thundering through the thick brush, absolutely crushing everything in his path, right as it was gearing up to lunge. And just like that, that slime comes crawling back for round two. He unleashes a massive flood of water that bursts out like a freaking fountain. The chimera froze, eyeing the spectacle with total suspicion, before slinking back into the dark forest, just as the water finally ebbed away. It finally clicked that the slime had saved their skins, and as he stared at it in pure awe, he realized this little guy was probably the reason he could suddenly understand the beast girl. He lunges over to check her pulse, letting out a massive sigh of relief that she's still alive. But his heart sinks when he spots a nasty rash, realizing instantly that she's suffering from a brutal allergic reaction. Chapter 2 kicks off and the stakes are already through the roof. The beast girl is desperately gasping for air, her lungs completely failing her. Amami takes one look and immediately realizes what's going down. It's a nasty combo of a severe asthma attack and a breakout of hives. She's fading fast and starting to lose consciousness right in front of him. He checks her wrist, but his heart sinks. There's absolutely no pulse. That's a terrifying sign, because you lose that radial beat the moment your blood pressure crashes below 80. It gets even scarier if it hits 70 at the hip or 60 at the neck, marking the final stages of a total collapse. Since her pressure is clearly under 90, she's officially spiraling into a life-threatening state of shock. This is it, anaphylaxis, the absolute nightmare known as anaphylactic shock. It's a lethal overreaction where the body's immune system goes totally haywire, launching a full-scale assault on every major organ. When blood pressure bottoms out and the lights go dark, you've officially entered the danger zone of full-blown shock. If nobody steps in fast, this situation turns fatal in a heartbeat. Whether it's a bite of food, a nasty bee sting, or even a dose of meds, any of these can trigger a total body meltdown. She spots a nasty gash on her leg, but she doesn't care about the blood, not when that allergic reaction is the real threat to her life. He rips open an adrenaline kit, prepping the needle with shaky, desperate hands. It's a brutal, temporary fix to stall the anaphylactic shock and keep his heart beating until he can get actual medical help. He slams the adrenaline shot straight into her leg. Out of nowhere, a pack of beastkin lunges into the scene. The oldest guy in this group steps forward and reveals he's actually a local from a village just down the road. He drops a massive bombshell, claiming the beast girl is his own granddaughter, and demands to know what the heck this mother thinks she's doing. Amami shouts that he's busy saving lives and orders them to haul the others to a safe, sterile spot immediately. We're dropping right into the heart of the beast folks' village. Mom quickly clips a pulse oximeter onto the beast girl's hand. This gadget tracks her oxygen and heart rate right through her skin to see if she's still hanging in there. The monitor flashes a solid 98%, and with a massive sigh of relief that she won't need a breathing tube, he immediately jumps into prepping a steroid drip. The elder watches in total shock, convinced his granddaughter's swollen face and gasping breath are a divine curse from the forest god. But if this human can actually pull off a miracle. But what if it's something way more twisted? The beastmen start losing it, screaming at the top of their lungs for their chief. He's finally leaving his human side behind to step up as a true master of magic. While he keeps working his medical magic, the beast girl's ragged gasps finally settle into a calm, steady rhythm. She's finally in the clear, leaving the chief standing there with his jaw on the floor. 4 haunting drips echo through the room, cutting right through the silence. The beast girl finally stirs, her eyes snapping open as she realizes she's back in the game. She tries to force herself up, but her legs buckle instantly and she crashes to the ground. Her mother rushes over, frantically checking to see if she's all right. She winces, realizing her busted leg is still giving her a ton of grief. He's not taking no for an answer, demanding to inspect every single nook and cranny. The beast girl freezes, eyeing him with total suspicion. But the slime suddenly lashes out, pinning her down and hoisting her right back onto the table as he finally lets out a heavy sigh of defeat and gives him the green light to keep going. Way off in a secluded church, the heavy toll of bells and the low hum of a somber prayer echo through the air. The priest begins his holy chant, unleashing a wave of divine light that stitches those nasty wounds right back together. He unleashes a surge of magic to mend the merchant's busted hand. Suddenly, this blinding glow surges out and completely swallows the wound. And just like that, his mangled skin knits itself back together as if nothing ever happened. Then we meet Awestruck, a merchant who's always looking to make a quick buck. He breathes a massive sigh of relief, thanking his lucky stars he survived that monster encounter, while the priest just shrugs it off, claiming it was all divine intervention and the man's own faith that saved his skin. As the gold clinks down his sleeve, he casually remarks that the merchant's buddies might still be alive if he'd just bothered to heal them a little sooner. He wraps things up with a look of pure disgust, basically telling them their faith was just too weak to cut it. And man, talk about a massive waste. What an absolute shame. Back at the Beast Folk village, the mummy finally wraps up his treatment on the Beast Girl. The surgery went off without a hitch. She's out cold from the meds, and since she's so young, she's gonna bounce back in no time. Amami breathes a massive sigh of relief seeing her back on her feet, while the Beast Girl is absolutely floored and starts buzzing with questions. Now he's left questioning if he's actually staring down a real-deal mage. She just laughs the idea off, completely unconvinced. He thinks to himself that if he actually possessed real magic, he'd be checking her pulse without trimming her nails and snapping that collar off like it was nothing. But he's no wizard. He's just a doctor who relies on medical science instead of flashy sorcery. Then the Beast Girl drops a bombshell. Apparently, anesthesia is a rare healing magic only humans can use. Her mom quickly sets her straight, explaining that medicine isn't some elite magic but a skill meant for everyone. Yet the girl still pulls back, convinced that being a beast folk slave makes those dreams impossible for someone like her. He gives her the ultimate vote of confidence, promising that if she's ready to learn, they're going to master this together as a team. He introduces himself as Yudo Amami and asks for her name, and she tells him she's Corona. He gives her a warm welcome, telling her he's hyped to finally work by her side. Just as the chief walks in and Amami drops the best news possible, his granddaughter is finally making a massive recovery. The chief breathes a massive sigh of relief, but then he drops a cold-blooded bombshell. If those slave traders ever come back, they'll just hand Corona over all over again. The poor girl starts shaking uncontrollably, while her mother stares at the chief in pure, utter shock. But the chief isn't finished yet, and he keeps right on talking. He barks at Amami for violating the slave laws, explaining that Corona was the price paid for the village's peace, and that the church has a total monopoly on healing magic. The village is officially tapped out, and Amami's about to find out the hard way that playing dumb won't save her from the law's iron fist. Corona frantically pleads for Amami's innocence, but the chief shuts her down hard, reminding her that a slave has no right to speak. Boiling with rage at the injustice, he shouts that he can't just stand by while someone is suffering right in front of his eyes. The chief snaps at him, preaching that magic is the ultimate power, way more valuable than life itself, and since she's officially a massive threat, this mother figure has to be taken out. Before he can even blink, the walls explode into rubble as a massive chimera tears its way straight into the room. The beast folk are absolutely losing it, screaming in pure terror at the sight of what they call the forest god. Pure chaos erupts as the realization hits. This monster has just invaded their home. One beast man hauls the chief away, sobbing that this has never happened before, and their entire village is finished. The chief is absolutely losing it, pointing a trembling finger at Amami and blaming him for this entire catastrophe. As the world literally tears itself apart, Amami covers his face from the flying shrapnel while the whole scene spirals into pure, unadulterated madness. This massive chimera towers right over them, its entire body shaking with a rage that's just seconds away from snapping. Corona watches like a hawk, completely thrown off that his opponent hasn't even tried to strike yet. Amami catches the slime signaling toward the beast's flank and immediately follows its lead. Buried deep inside the chimera's body is a mysterious object, and it's clearly the reason this beast is going absolutely berserk. Amami sizes up the carnage and cooks up a plan on the fly, pitching the beast folk a deal right in the middle of the madness. He offers to shut down the rampaging chimera in exchange for their freedom, but the beastmen just sneer at the thought of cutting a deal with a lowly human. The chief cuts him off and gives the green light, deciding that's a sacrifice they're more than ready to make, while the mother turns her focus back to the chimera's jagged wound. He's sizing up the beast for the perfect place to slice, the creature snarling right in his face while the chief screams to know what he's actually planning. Amami drops a bombshell, announcing his plan to dig that foreign object right out of the chimera's body. The village chief is absolutely losing it, horrified that anyone would dare lay a finger on their sacred forest god. Amami calls out for Corona's help, and without missing a beat, she jumps right into the fray. As he gears up for the procedure, he locks in on his unshakable oath, knowing that under Japanese law, a doctor can't just turn their back on a patient without a seriously good reason. Remembering his creed, he doubles down on his vow. Whether it's a low-life thug, a savage beast, or even a literal god, if they're in pain, he's reaching out to save them. And that right there is the true heavy weight of what it means to be a doctor. He snaps open the saline, douses the wound in stinging alcohol, and the chimera lets out a bone-shaking roar of pure agony. In a heartbeat, the slime surges forward and wraps the creature up tight, pinning it to the ground. The mother gives the slime a quick nod of thanks, telling him to keep that chimera pinned down while she finishes working her magic. He slaps on some lidocaine, a hardcore local anesthetic that basically hijacks his nerves, killing all feeling and stopping his muscles dead in their tracks. The chimera's violent thrashing finally dies down as the slime lets go, all because that heavy-duty midazolam kicks in and sends the beast straight to dreamland. Man, talk about a relief that the sedative actually worked. Amami grips his razor, steeling his nerves for the grim task ahead. A deadly infection is a massive risk, but at this point he's totally out of options. He meticulously shaves away the fur, finally exposing the raw damage hidden underneath. He leans in close, eyes narrowing as he scrutinizes every single detail. He realizes the spear is barbed like a wicked fishhook, making it impossible to just yank out. And while he desperately needs a sterile operating room, that's a luxury he definitely doesn't have right now. He scrubs the area down with iodine, that sharp, clinical sting instantly filling the room, She frantically covers the bleeding wound and screams for Corona to jump in and help. He pulls a surgical blade from the bag and orders Corona to use forceps to lock it onto the handle. Zero skin-to-metal contact allowed, and she follows his lead with razor-sharp focus. Her hands are visibly shaking as she white-knuckles the forceps, while he reminds her that one slip with this razor-sharp blade is all it takes. She carefully slides the piece into position, clicking it home with a sharp nudge to the left, and as soon as she gives the signal, Amami grabs his scalpel to get to work. He tells Corona he's handling the mission solo, but he's got one more favor to ask. He needs her to look after the wounded, washing their injuries and getting them into fresh clothes. He admits it's a massive favor with everything going sideways, while Corona just looks away, her hesitation practically screaming. But then he snaps back up, locking in with absolute resolve. She doesn't waste a heartbeat, sprinting off to grab the supplies he needs. Amami locks his focus back onto the sleeping Chimera, taking a deep breath to steady his nerves. The air is thick with tension, the only sound being the rhythmic drip of antiseptic hitting the floor. With fire in his eyes, he readies his tools and whispers the words that mark the start of the operation. It's time to get that foreign object out. Chapter 3 kicks off with a flashback as Corona corners the chief, demanding to know the truth about the mysterious forest god. The chief makes it crystal clear. The only reason their tribe is still standing is thanks to the divine protection of the forest god. With razor-sharp claws, gnashing fangs, and a terrifying curse, this beast absolutely shredded anyone who even thought about hurting them. When Corona pressed for the truth about the curse, the chief dropped a bombshell. One touch of the forest god, and you're marked for life. He laid down the law, making it clear she was never to get anywhere near that beast. Back in the present, Amami is fighting against the clock as he operates on the Chimera. But there's a huge problem. The spear buried in its flesh is barbed, making it a total nightmare to extract. Think of it like a massive fishhook. Once it's in, it's not coming out without a fight. Sure, he could try to twist it and push the point through to snip the barb, but there's no way that trick is working on a weapon this massive. There's no other choice. It has to be cut out, and he grips that scalpel with nerves of absolute steel. He eyes the nasty bulges where those barbs are buried, applies some pressure, and starts slicing right in. The steel glides through like absolute butter, and for a split second, he finally feels a massive wave of relief. Holding his breath, he gingerly inches the fragment toward one of those mysterious bulges. His scalpel bites deep, only to screech against something cold, hard, and definitely metal. He maneuvers around the side, and suddenly, a lethal flash of steel catches his eye. His eyes go wide as that wicked barb finally shows itself, and he's praying there aren't any nasty shards still buried deep in the wound. He whips around, scanning the edge of the zone to track down that second bar. The beast folk are all on edge, eyes glued to the chaos as they wait for any sign of life. One guy mutters that he can't see a damn thing, just hoping and praying that everything is going okay. But the chief looks grim, admitting that even he's totally in the dark about what's happening. Then he drops the hammer. If the human actually manages to save their forest god, they're gonna have to take him out regardless. Because the second he touches that deity, he's hit with a curse that's way past the point of no return. Corona rushes back onto the scene, hauling fresh water and a bundle of cloth. She turns to her grandfather and makes it clear. She's healing every single person on the field, and he's next on the list. Meanwhile, this lethal mother figure finally reveals both of her wicked barbs. He's already prepping the stitches for the second that foreign object gets ripped out. But time is a luxury he doesn't have. He needs to move now. Man, a real operating table would have made this nightmare a whole lot easier. But he's making every single scrap he's got work in his favor. He white-knuckles the base of the spear, bracing himself to rip it out. He sucks in a massive breath, plants his feet, and yanks with every single ounce of strength he has left. The beast stirs for a second, but those sedatives are holding strong, keeping it completely out cold. The mother freezes, heart hammering as she prays the kid stays out cold, especially since he's convinced the poor thing was already stabbed while it was unconscious. He locks back in and restarts the extraction, moving with slow, heart-pounding precision. He yanks the barbed spear right out of the Chimera's body, and blood sprays everywhere the second that metal clears the wound. Meanwhile, the chief snaps at Corona for trying to patch him up, barking that she's just a slave who needs to stay in her lane. She fires back, admitting that even though they've branded her a slave, she flat out refuses to stay that way. She knows exactly what it's like to hit rock bottom, and she's not about to turn her back on anyone in pain, not even him. The beastkin fall dead silent as one grumbles about following a human mage's orders, though another snaps back that it beats dying in the dirt, all while a wounded soldier desperately tries to stop the blood pouring from his mangled arm. Finally, every eye in the room locks onto the chief, and after a heavy, suffocating silence, he finally gives a hesitant nod, and as the last of the spear is yanked from the chimera's body, Mommy lets out a massive sigh of relief. It's finally out, and she can finally breathe again. But in a split second, a massive geyser of blood bursts from the wound, painting him head to toe. His mind is spinning as he realizes that spear sliced right through an artery, forcing him to ditch his weapon and frantically scramble for some gauze. His hands move on pure instinct while the nearby beast folk shriek in horror at the sheer amount of blood, sending a wave of panic through the omelatures as the gravity of the situation finally hits home. She slams the gauze onto the open wound, putting all her weight into it to stop the bleeding. He feels that frantic thrum of blood right under his fingertips, and he knows the grim reality. Somewhere deep inside, an artery is still gushing. He clamps down on the source with everything he's got, and as the bleeding finally starts to taper off, he lets out a quick, desperate sigh of relief. Corona watches on, her voice trembling with fear as she calls out to him, but the chief barks at her to stay back, warning that even a drop of the forest god's blood will curse her soul forever. He completely tunes out the chaos behind him, though. He's laser-focused on the task at hand, knowing he has to clamp that vessel and tie it off before it's too late. He snaps up his tools and readies the forceps, calculating every move with surgical precision. But just as he's about to dive in, the sky turns pitch black as massive clouds roll in and kill the visibility. He spits a curse as his vision starts to fade, but he knows he has to plug that wound right now, or he's finished. He whips around to Corona, shouting for her backup yet again. She freezes as her grandfather's warning screams in her head. "Stay away from the forest god." But her mother's voice cuts through the panic, reminding her that anyone can be a healer if they've got the heart to try. His steady voice rings in her head. "We'll do it together." And suddenly the look in her eyes completely transforms. Determination blazes in her eyes as she offers a silent apology to her grandfather, and he steps up to join the fight, and Corona wastes no time charging right to his side. Amami gives her a quick thanks for the light and immediately asks for her help snagging one of the surgical tools. He pulls out some hemostatic forceps, pointing out that they're basically twins to the tool she used for the scalpel blade, just with a specialized curved tip. Her hands are shaking like crazy as she scans the tools, finally grabbing a pair of curved forceps and asking if she got it right, and Mommy just nods with a smirk, totally impressed she nailed it despite his super vague instructions. He snatches the tool from her, his focus sharpening into a razor-thin edge. These are hemostatic forceps, deadly precise tools meant to clamp down and stop the bleeding, whether they're hooked, curved, or straight. He's holding a pair of pion forceps, a legendary surgical tool named after a 19th century French master, built for one thing: stopping blood in its tracks. As storm clouds roll in and the flickering light dances over the carnage, he takes a long, steadying breath. With Corona's help, he prepares to clamp the vessel and continue his desperate struggle to save the forest god. He barks at Corona to grab the stick-like object sitting right there at the bottom right. She clicked the device to life, instantly recognizing that same magic tool from the forest, and as she beamed the light right into the open wound on the mother's orders, she finally tossed her torch aside. Corona kept the light steady as Amami peeled back the gauze, but the second he did, blood started spraying everywhere, forcing him to clamp down hard while he scrambled to stop the flow. After a few heart-stopping moments, the surge finally died down, leaving Corona absolutely floored as Amami gave the nod. He finally managed to stop the bleeding, but they weren't out of the woods yet. Without wasting a second, he dove right back into treating the wound. When Corona caught a glimpse of him, she nearly jumped out of her skin. Amami was a total mess, completely drenched in blood from head to toe. Even in that absolute filth, he didn't even flinch, keeping his cool and finishing the job without a second thought. A doctor never turns their back on a patient, even when things look hopeless, and Corona watched in total silence as Mommy started stitching that nasty wound shut. He's lightning fast, cycling through suture specs in his head, from the heavy-duty size 10s down to size 1, and then even thinner into the 0 range where the higher the number, the more microscopic the thread gets. They use special sutures that literally melt away inside the body for quick heals. But for those brutal wounds that need serious backup, they bring out the heavy-duty threads that never budge. He cinched the stitches tight with surgical precision, but he knew if those threads even budged, the bleeding would come roaring back. Moving with lightning speed, he cinched those bindings tight. He's locked in, pulling off the high-stakes task of tying off those blood vessels with surgical precision. With the bleeding finally under control, he yanks off the clamp. The immediate crisis is over, giving him just a split second to catch his breath. But don't celebrate yet, because that wound is still a ticking time bomb. He has to carve away the contaminated skin before closing it up, or a nasty infection will ruin everything. To keep the fluids from building up, he slides in a Penrose drain to keep the area clear. This flexible little tube is the only thing keeping blood and nasty fluids from building up after that brutal operation. He breaks down the plan to Corona, asking her to stick with him for just one more push, and she gives a firm nod while the beastkin watch from the sidelines, completely stunned by what they're seeing. He really wanted to stay and make sure the chimera actually pulled through, but since he was in a race against time, he just had to trust that the Penrose Drain, a medical masterpiece named after the legendary Charles Penrose, would keep his patient stable while he was gone. Time blurred together until, suddenly, the first light of dawn started bleeding through the trees. That grueling, heart-pounding night was finally behind them as the morning sun took over. Corona was floored by his performance, giving him major props for his insane level of endurance. Running on fumes but feeling a massive wave of relief, Amami thanked her, knowing she'd pushed herself just as hard. And the forest god, it had managed to survive the nightmare right along with them. Almost as if it could hear them, the chimera's eyes slowly fluttered open. Seeing his success, Amami finally hit the dirt in total exhaustion, gasping that the foreign object was officially history. The next morning down by the river, Corona offers to scrub Amami's gear and even starts to They told him to chill out and rest, but he wasn't having it. He was already busy scrubbing the blood off his skin. He was desperate to shield them from the infection, but when he started preaching about the lethality of viruses, Corona was left looking completely baffled. Amy rushed over, blurted out an apology, and leaned in close to inspect her eyes. He realized it wasn't just their bodies that needed a scrubbing. They had to get their eyes clear too. Corona admits she usually splashes her face there, but man, it really stings when that water hits her eyes. Amami warns her that this river water is far from clean, but right now, flushing the blood out of their vision is the only thing that matters. He tells her straight up, it's gonna burn like hell, but she's just gotta grit her teeth and take it. He realized that a single splash of infected blood into a surgeon's eye could be a total death sentence, making those goggles a literal lifesaver. And after wrapping things up, he made sure to give Corona some serious props, and he grumbled about needing a legit soak instead of just scrubbing off in the river. But Corona reminded him that luxury baths are a privilege reserved strictly for human nobles. Amami's mind started racing the second those snooty aristocrats were mentioned. But before he could get another word out, Corona realizes he's still caked in blood and starts muttering about purging the viruses. But right then, Amami's eyes roll back and he collapses. He plunged headfirst into the river, leaving Corona screaming in total panic. Back at the Beast Folk village, Amami, now rocking some fresh new threads, sits down with the chief and makes his intentions clear. He's taking Corona and hitting the open road. He thought he had a handle on the situation, but he knew those same humans could return at any moment to snatch her up. The chief hung his head and dropped the bombshell. Corona's mom died during childbirth, and her dad was killed on a hunt, a soul-crushing reality that he says is just a daily occurrence for their people. It finally clicked for Mommy. In this world, whether you're giving birth or just trying to find food, you're constantly staring death right in the face. He recalled how Japan's maternal mortality rate was a staggering 409 back in 1899, worlds away from the modern, life-saving average of just 3.3. The chief pointed out that a single healing mage could save them all, but experts like that are practically non-existent in the sticks. Amami's mind raced to places like Sierra Leone, where the death toll spikes to a horrifying 1,300, hammering home just how desperate things really are. The chief kept laying out the grim reality. Their youth were gone, their forest god was wounded, and it was only a matter of time before the humans moved in to seize their dying home. Honestly, Corona making her escape before things went south might have just been written in the stars. The second Corona opened his eyes, the chief was absolutely stunned, admitting that even though he'd given his soul for the village, the cold, hard truth was finally starting to crush him. Thinking back to the mayor on that island in Japan, she looked the chief right in the eye and declared that absolutely nobody deserves to be left behind. He refused to accept it, convinced there just had to be another way out. He pleaded with the chief, insisting that he didn't have to shoulder this massive weight all on his own. Corona looked her Gramps right in the eyes and gave him her word. She was definitely coming back home. She poured her heart out, thanking him for saving the villagers, the forest god, and her own life, vowing to stand by Amami's side and help with his work from here on out. After mastering the secret arts of healing the sick and wounded, she finally made her triumphant return to the village. The chief's eyes instantly welled up with tears the moment he laid eyes on her. One of the mothers spoke up, asking where he could possibly find the medical gear needed to treat everyone. The chief reveals a massive secret. He's actually set foot in the human world before, but one mom shuts him down instantly, arguing there's no way someone like him would ever fit in with humanity. But more than anything, His top priority was finding a hideout where Corona would be completely out of harm's way. He leaned in and asked if there was actually a place where all these different races lived together in harmony. We're dropping straight into the elven lands, right at the entrance of the legendary World Tree Cave. Massive vines are surging through the streets and swallowing every building in sight. Vibrant greenery surged forward, swallowing every single surface in sight. Two figures stood tall, facing down a massive assembly of elves. We're looking at a rugged, bearded guy and a woman with striking jet-black hair. The priest stepped up and declared that these two mages were being shipped off to master the legendary art of healing. Princess Yuno watched with a heavy heart, realizing that while every other race was gifted with insane powers, humans were the only ones who could actually pull off the miracle of healing magic. She put her entire world in their hands, and the priest didn't hesitate, swearing on his faith to go all out. Standing right next to the princess, Queen Melina couldn't help but scoff at the word faith, remembering how those greedy humans were basically extorting them with massive taxes and using their healing magic as a political hostage. But she couldn't ignore the brutal truth. There are some wounds and sicknesses out there that normal medicine just can't touch, leaving magic as the only way to survive. She was left dreaming of a world where her people finally possessed the power to stitch their own wounds back together. Back at the Beast Folk village, the whole tribe crowded around to see Amami and Corona off. They were officially fanboying, admitting they'd never seen a human with skills as insane as Amami's. Amami just played it cool, brushing off their apologies like it was all in a day's work. He drilled the basics into them one last time. Keep those wounds sterile, scrub those hands, and don't you dare skip the gargling. The villagers roared his advice back with pure hype, and that's when the chief stepped up to He revealed that heading west leads straight into the heart of the demon realm, a land where humans are non-existent and all kinds of wild races live side by side. After Amami offers his thanks, the chief gives Corona a strict rule. Once they hit the road, she has to call Amami master to keep her safe as a beast person traveling in a human world. Corona was hyped and jumped right on board, while Amami felt the title was super awkward but decided to roll with it anyway. They gave the villagers one last wave before hitting the road to start their grand adventure. The chief's vision blurred with tears as he watched them go, the sight hitting him like a freight train as he remembered Corona's father making that exact same departure. As they pushed deeper into their journey, you could see the mother's face tightening with pure dread. He dropped a bombshell. When he went to check on the forest god's injury yesterday, the massive beast had already vanished without a trace. He knew he couldn't stick around to monitor the recovery forever, but the fear of a dead cavity forming and rotting from the inside kept him on edge. He recalled how a sloppy stitch job could leave a hollow pocket under the skin, creating a dangerous gap where the body was never meant to have one. These nasty pockets trap fluid and pus, turning the entire wound into a festering, infectious mess that completely kills the healing process. Corona nearly jumped out of his skin when that massive chimera came lunging out from behind the trees. The massive beast collapsed right at their feet, and its mother came sprinting over to its side. He leaned in to check the injury and his jaw dropped. The wound was literally knitting itself back together, with fresh fur already sprouting over the scar. Part of him was dying to write a groundbreaking medical paper on this incredible biology, but he knew those days were long gone. He gave the chimera a final, gentle pat, whispering how sorry he was, that he couldn't stay to watch it heal and praying it would stay far away from any more danger. Just as Amami and Corona started to head out, the chimera began tailing them, making Amami spin around in total shock. And they finally realized the little guy just wanted to tag along, its face absolutely lighting up with pure joy as the beast nuzzled him like a loyal pet. And just like that, the journey continued with a powerhouse chimera officially joining the squad. The mom started questioning if it was actually okay to drag a literal forest god along with them. But Corona was so paralyzed with fear she couldn't even manage a reply. Amami figured safety in numbers was their best bet against any more human ambushes. But the slime was already green with envy over the chimera, yanking on his hair to reclaim the spotlight. Amami smoothed things over with some slime cuddles, but a jealous Corona wasn't having it and immediately tackled him with a hug. She's practically begging him to give her some head pats too. Amami finally called it time to move out. He was still totally in the dark about this crazy world, but at least he didn't have to brave the unknown alone anymore. Switching gears to the World Tree Cave, Krenelson finally comes face to face with the priest, a mysterious crest. Ekrest made it crystal clear. That wasn't just a chat, it was a straight-up warning. Living right alongside them in those tree caves were the true veterans, ancient souls who had survived long enough to uncover the world's deepest secrets. But Ekrest made it crystal clear. If he catches anyone trying to swipe that human's healing magic, he has to shut them down immediately. She made it crystal clear that healing magic was a human-only privilege, the secret power that built their empire and forced every other race to finally show them some respect. Life there was a total dream, safe, secure, and perfect. But a mysterious crest carried a chilling warning. If their healing magic ever leaked to the outside world, their entire nation would be erased from existence in a heartbeat. In this world, it was a brutal law of nature. If you were weak, you were destined to be crushed underfoot. Back then, humanity was at the absolute bottom of the food chain, bullied by demi-humans, hunted by demons, and driven into hiding by massive dragons. Taking pity on their suffering, God finally stepped in and gifted them a tiny spark of his own divine healing magic. When a world-ending plague eventually swept through and started devouring every living soul, humans used that gift to cheat death and outpopulate every other race on the planet. Before long, these healers developed a massive god complex, convinced their powers made them the divine rulers of the entire world. God was absolutely disgusted by their massive egos, realizing he never meant for healing magic to turn them into tyrants, so he officially cut off the flow of his divine miracles. Instead, he decided to arm the weak with a completely different brand of power. Forget divine intervention or flashy magic. He bet everything on the power of human logic, sending a total wildcard to guide those fragile lives. Meet Yuro Amami, a doctor on a mission to save a broken world and bring back the light using nothing but his medical genius. We're diving back into the elven lands for Chapter 5, where Sia is already breathing down Krenelson's neck about his reckless choice. But Krenelson isn't budging, reminding her with a cold stare that she saw the grim reality with her own 2 eyes. No amount of high-tier magic or legendary herbs could touch the rot spreading through their lands. It was a lost cause. They were staring down a curse that was beyond any hope of salvation. Sia froze, realizing this move was a one-way ticket to total war with humanity. And even if they made it back home, they'd be the scapegoats facing a fate worse than death. Clenching his jaw, Krenelson warned that admitting the cure was a bust would basically be signing their own death warrants, so he made the call to bail right this second. Meanwhile, Corona is just vibing by a campfire with a smile on her face, totally clueless that a massive disaster is popping off right now. Meanwhile, back at the world tree, Queen Melina is looming over her kingdom from her throne with Princess Yuno bursts into the hall, gasping for air as she tries to keep it professional for the queen, only to drop the bombshell that those human healers have completely vanished. Queen Melina stood frozen in shock as her guards waited for her command, and she let out a heavy sigh as the crushing weight of the news finally started to sink in. Yuno warned her that the dragon folk would sniff this out any second, so Queen Melina accepted the inevitable and decided she'd be the one to break the news herself. 2 massive dragonkin suddenly loomed over them, standing guard like a pair of living walls. Melina bursts onto the scene and drops into a deep bow, desperately apologizing as she spills the beans about the escape before the rumors can even start. And surprisingly, the black-haired dragon actually respects her move. Honestly, smart move. If they hadn't stopped, they would have walked straight into a total nightmare. Queen Melina's heart absolutely sank as the realization hit her. The dragons were 10 steps ahead. They already knew. But then, the black-haired dragon just casually signals for her to be let through. Deep inside the dragon folk's grand office, their intimidating leader stared down Queen Melina and Princess Yuno with a gaze that could cut through stone. His voice went ice-cold as he looked them dead in the eye, demanding to know exactly how they planned to pay for their massive failure. But deep in the heart of the woods, a massive beast is already on the prowl. Mommy was hard at work, desperately trying to patch up the chimera's nasty wounds. He carefully inspected the stitches and saw that the wound had finally closed up for good. The fur was still looking a little thin, but the injury itself was officially history. He gave the chimera a quick apology for the rough haircut he'd given it earlier, but the beast didn't mind at all, showing its love with a big, wet lick right across his face. Corona stares down at her busted leg, still wrapped in bandages, and feels a massive sting of disappointment that it's not better yet. Amami quickly jumps in to comfort her, promising that there's absolutely nothing to worry about. It's not that her body is failing. It's just that the chimera's healing speed is on a whole different level of crazy. He's geeking out, calling her recovery a medical goldmine that could save lives. But while Corona is still scratching her head at the jargon, a sharp rustle in the shadows shatters the silence. Out of nowhere, a snake lunges from the shadows right at Corona, and as they both scream in shock, the serpent strikes her collar and snaps it wide open. The snake vanished into the shadows in a heartbeat, leaving the mom gasping for air. But she wasn't hurt. She realized the creature had actually unlatched her collar, almost like it was trying to apologize for wounding her leg earlier. Corona caught the hint instantly, her face lighting up with a warm, genuine smile. She wrapped the massive serpent in a tight embrace, whispering her thanks to the forest god. but the touching moment was instantly ruined when the slime started yanking on the mom's cheek. He whipped around, totally clueless, but the slime was freaking out, pointing its little arm toward a suspicious noise echoing from deep within the forest. Princess Yuno is desperately bolting through the dense forest, with a pack of pitch-black wolves snapping at her heels. She whipped around to unleash her magic, but she was cut short before she could even finish the chant. A wolf snaps at her face, and as she stumbles back, the terrifying reality sinks in. She's completely surrounded. Panic surged through her as she realized the timing couldn't be worse. She had to get those healers back immediately, but now a pack of black wolves was standing right in her way. The pack starts closing in, their low snarls echoing through the trees as they prepare to strike. Boom! The Chimera lunges into the fray with his mom on his back, crushing those wolves into the dirt and sending the rest of them running for their lives. The survivors shrieked and bolted into the woods, leaving the clearing dead silent as Amami rushed to Yuno's side, who was already starting to sway. Her world started to blur, but she just barely caught sight of the most unlikely trio: a chimera, a beastman, and a human. As the darkness swallowed her whole, her final dazed thought was a shock of pure disbelief. She swore she was looking right at the forest god. She crumpled toward the floor, but a woman lunged forward and snatched her up just before she could hit the deck. He saw she was in bad shape, and knew they had to act fast. So while a frantic Corona asked what to do, a mother stepped in and told her to help get the woman onto the ground. He hears a soft padding sound and turns to find the slime literally molding itself into a comfy pillow. And while he's super touched, he has to ask if the little guy is actually cool with that. He gently laid Princess Yuno down and immediately scanned her body for injuries, using every single drop of his remaining saline to wash out the deepest gash first. He slammed gauze onto the wound to kill the bleeding and quickly checked the damage. Noticing the blood still oozing, he realized Solution E was his best bet and barked at Corona to go grab it immediately. She brings over the vial, and he confirms it's the jackpot, lidocaine mixed with epinephrine. A killer combo that numbs the pain and chokes off the blood flow to keep things from getting messy. He draws the serum into the syringe, prepping that needle for action. Mommy drove the needle straight into the open gash, bypassing the surface to hit the deep tissue where it mattered most. Corona didn't say a word, her eyes glued to him as he put in the work. A moment later, he's back at it, slamming the gauze down to keep the pressure on. And just like that, the bleeding stops dead in its tracks. You satisfied yet? He moves right to the next phase, snatching up the skin stapler with total precision. Every medical detail flashes through his mind as he prepares to work. This beast of a tool is designed to seal up massive gashes in the blink of an eye. It's way better than old-school stitches, keeping the skin from tearing while making sure the blood keeps pumping. This technique slashes tissue tension to make the procedure lightning fast, but he knows the catch. If a nerve or bone is within 5 millimeters of the surface, it's a total no-go, so he stays focused as he perfectly aligns the edges of the gash, and he started hammering those staples home, one agonizing click at a time. Corona's eyes go wide as she watches the wound zip shut perfectly right before her eyes. She's totally floored by the tool, unable to believe how effortlessly it just erased the injury. Amami plays it cool though, pointing out that since it was just a shallow, clean cut, the whole thing was actually a breeze. While scrubbing down his gear and tossing the scraps, he notices his stash is hitting rock bottom. That realization sends a massive wave of dread straight through him. He's got to find a way to restock his gear, and he's got to do it fast. A little while later, Princess Yuno finally starts to stir. Her eyes slowly flutter open as she regains consciousness. She wakes up to a slime staring her right in the face and lets out a massive scream. She lets out another blood-curdling scream the second she spots that massive chimera looming over her, and her heart sinks even further when she sees Amami and Corona closing in. Corona flashes a relieved smile, glad to see she's finally back in the land of the living. But as Yuno reaches up to touch her head, a sharp jolt of agony rips through her wound, and Corona immediately barked a warning for her to keep her hands off, and her mom backed him up, telling her to just lie back and rest. He'd already patched up every single wound, but her body still needed serious time to recover. Yuno reached up to check her head and realized the bleeding had completely stopped. Mommy explained that he'd actually stitched the wound shut himself. He told her there might be a tiny scar, but she could easily hide it under her hair. She just stared at him, her eyes wide with pure disbelief. A mere human had actually patched her up without using a single drop of magic. The whole situation left her completely and utterly baffled, especially since she remembered exactly how much blood she'd been losing. He couldn't help but wonder, was this guy packing some secret healing magic of his own? He hesitated for a heartbeat, but before he could even get a word out, Corona jumps in with total confidence. hyping her master up as a one-of-a-kind legend and the undisputed GOAT of healing magic, while the mom just hides a smirk because she knows that's a massive overstatement. But deep down, he made a silent vow to always be the hero for anyone who needed a hand. Witnessing their pure hearts, Princess Yuno started questioning everything, wondering if the people should ditch the church's rigid rules and follow the forest god instead. The chimera just tilted its head in total confusion, having absolutely no clue what she was even talking about. At her breaking point, Princess Yuno spins toward Amami with tears streaming down her face. Shaking with fear, she begs the healer to be the miracle they all need. Amami's eyes go wide, but he doesn't hesitate for a second to say yes. Through her sobs, Yuno explains that her entire kingdom is hanging by a thread. Amami keeps his cool, asking for the coordinates so they can get moving. Princess Yuno's eyes start to well up, but she quickly brushes the tears away, refusing to let herself break. She lays it all out. He's got to journey to her homeland if he wants any hope of curing that gruesome blood-spewing sickness. A mother listens in absolute horror as Corona breaks down the nightmare. It starts with gut-wrenching pain, leads to coughing up pools of blood, and has already wiped out her entire village. While Princess Yuno adds that the victims' bodies literally waste away as they grow weaker by the second. Amami takes one look and knows it's internal bleeding, and those black stools are a dead giveaway that the upper GI tract is in serious trouble. Amami's mind races through the entire digestive system, from the mouth to the finish line, but he's dead certain the source of the chaos is hiding in the upper tract. He knows he can't prove a thing without seeing the damage for himself, so he makes the call. They're moving out right now. He asks the chimera if they can take to the skies one more time, and the beast lets out a hyped-up growl in total agreement. The whole crew scrambles onto its back, ready for the ride of their lives. With one explosive burst of speed, the chimera charges into the distance. It beats its wings and takes flight, soaring full speed toward the World Tree Cave. As they climb higher, Amami and the crew are absolutely floored by the massive, jaw-dropping world stretching out beneath them. Back at the Dragonfolk HQ, one of the guys is seriously doubting the plan, asking number 2 if he really thinks Princess Yuno can pull through and bring those healing mages back. Number 2 fires back with total confidence, swearing that if it doesn't happen, her desperation will force her to take matters into her own hands. Her mother and every single soul in her homeland are about to be absolutely wiped out. Queen Melina is absolutely gripped by dread, her heart heavy with fear for her daughter's safety. Okasawa shot down this captain's offer for a fishing trip tomorrow, and he shut them down instantly, refusing to believe that a couple of drinks and a good night's sleep would actually fix him. He gave a firm nod, promising to stay sharp as the captain warned that a massive storm was closing in. But then he looked around, realizing Amami had completely vanished into thin air. Amami's crew finally reaches the elven domain, where they're marched straight to the massive castle looming over the land, the very fortress serving as a grim quarantine for everyone suffering from that horrific blood-spewing plague. Their traveling companion finally cracked, confessing she'd been hiding a game-changing secret because she was just too terrified of what might happen. If she'd just come clean, they never would have shown up. And now she's kicking herself because lying was a pretty trash way to repay them for everything they'd done. The group's jaws hit the floor the second they laid eyes on that massive fortress. Just then, a mysterious figure stepped out from the shadows. The air turned electric the second those dragonfolk stopped dead in their tracks right in front of Amami and his crew. Alex sneered at Yuno with pure hatred, calling her a lying fool for showing up with a chimera to harvest their souls. But she stood her ground, swearing the forest god himself had sent them. She kept her word and returned with a powerful mage in tow, desperately begging them to finally set her mother free. This one conversation blew the lid off every bitter, long-held grudge they'd been hiding. Yuno fired back, insisting that while the elves were thankful for the dragonfolk's insane power and protection, it didn't change the fact that they'd straight-up betrayed their sacred pact. They snatched her mother away and put her through absolute hell, as she screamed at them for spitting on the sacred life the World Tree had shared with them. She threw it right back in Alex's face, demanding to know if he could even fathom the soul-crushing agony of watching someone you love suffer. Alec fired back, exposing the system's rot, while humans hoarded healing magic to line their pockets and treat dragonfolk like trash. His people were left with nothing but a legacy of misery and death. He spat on the idea that the dragonfolk owed humans a single ounce of respect, swearing to return every blow tenfold until humanity finally learned their lesson. His voice turned cold and deadly as he made a chilling promise. He was going to pay them back in nothing but pure blood and agony. Just as Alec prepared to make good on his word, the dragonfolk's faces turned cold and deadly, and while Queen Melina tried to step in, Yuno shut her down, refusing to let her mother's agony be ignored. Alec finally unleashes his magic, a massive pillar of fire erupting around him that leaves Amami speechless, and Yuno sweating as the tension hits a deadly breaking point. Out of nowhere, a massive blast of white smoke swallowed the bridge, leaving everyone completely blind. The dragon folk behind Alex were frozen solid, while the mummy and the rest of the squad desperately shielded their eyes from that blinding explosion. As the smoke finally clears, a colossal black dragon towers over them, looking absolutely terrifying. His mother's eyes practically popped out of her head the second she saw what was going down. This dragon unleashes a roar so massive it practically shakes the entire world, and blasted out a white-hot beam of pure energy. Charging full speed, straight for Amami. The slime lunges forward, stretching its gooey body out to blanket the entire area. He braced behind his shield as that massive energy beam slammed right into him, unleashing a massive tidal wave that slams into everything in its path. The blast suddenly shatters, turning into a massive downpour that soaks everyone in the area. Completely spent, the slime finally hit the floor, while the drenched but safe mother looked on in silent gratitude. Alec didn't even get a chance to wind up his next strike before the chimera exploded forward, closing the gap in a heartbeat. He lunges at the dragon with pure savagery, their collision rocking the entire bridge as fire and claws tear into a mess of teeth and muscle. Just as the tension in this face-off cranked up to a whole new level, Amami shoots his hand up, instantly commanding the entire room. The fighters freeze dead in their tracks, caught mid-swing. Ignoring Corona's frantic protests, Amami steps forward, dead set on finding and curing the person suffering from that gruesome blood-spewing plague. Alec was left completely rattled by his cold-blooded confidence, while Princess Yuno was low-key blown away by his sheer guts. Because to Amami, your race or where you came from doesn't mean a thing. If you're sick, she's going to save you, period. Alec didn't even get a chance to open his mouth before a booming voice cut him off, calling his name with total authority. Just then, the sovereign of the dragonfolk, Queen Lindworm, crashes onto the scene in a total berserk frenzy. Her sheer presence made the very air feel like it was turning to lead. Princess Yuno let out a heavy sigh, realizing the queen herself had finally stepped onto the stage. Queen Melina watched with pure dread as Lindworm boldly marched right past her. She squares up to Alec, absolutely livid that he'd attacked the only person who was actually trying to save her. Alec recoiled in shock, snapping back into human form as he desperately called out for his mother. But Lindworm's eyes were locked on the chimera, as he warned the boy that he had absolutely no clue what kind of nightmare he was actually facing. With a stone-cold expression, she marched right up to the group, her every step radiating an overwhelming sense of power. Her presence was so insanely heavy that Amami and the crew could feel their hearts hammering against their ribs. Lindworm lunged forward, his hand snapping out, and he reached out and firmly grasped the slime's hand, sealing their new bond. He greeted it with a smirk, acting like they were just two old friends catching up. The slime was practically vibrating with pure hype, and Lindworm let out a soft giggle before turning her attention back to the mommy. Her voice went stone-cold serious as she took the heat for the entire disaster, bowing her head in a deep, heartfelt apology for everything that went down. She immediately ordered her guards to set Queen Melina free, apologizing for her son's trashy behavior, and while Alex started screaming in rage at his mother's weakness, Lindworm suddenly reached out and clamped a hand over her mouth, while blood came gushing right through her clenched fingers. Amami and Alex stood paralyzed with absolute dread as they watched her collapse to her knees. A mother bolts forward, instantly recognizing those horrific blood-spitting symptoms. This was her, the very patient they'd come to save. Mom didn't waste a single second demanding she be taken to rest immediately. Yuno jumped to obey while Corona handled all their gear. Alec completely snaps, lunging at him in a blind panic while screaming that no disgusting human has the right to lay a finger on his mother. She buried a fist deep into his gut, silencing his protest before he could even gasp, and barked out an order for him to get moving. Deep inside the elven castle, two dragonfolk stood watch at the door, while a healer carefully examined Queen Lindworm in her private chamber. He gently peeled back her eyelid, scanning the pale flesh hidden underneath. The total lack of color immediately caught his eye. There it was, the dead giveaway of conjunctival rim pallor. Queen Melina, Princess Yuno, and the chimera watched in dead silence as he broke down the symptoms. Usually, a healthy eyelid is flushed bright red with blood, popping against the white interior. But when anemia kicks in, that vibrant red vanishes, leaving both edges a ghostly, uniform pale. One look was all he needed to confirm his gut feeling was dead on. Queen Lindworm wasn't suffering from some mysterious curse or magical hex. This was a cold, hard biological breakdown happening deep inside her own veins. Amami explained that by human standards, the queen was battling a brutal case of anemia. and if her condition kept spiraling, she'd need a high-stakes blood transfusion just to survive. He broke down the process, explaining they'd have to pump someone else's blood straight into her veins to replace every drop she'd lost. The elves were caught completely off guard, and honestly, they were absolutely losing their minds. Queen Melina drops a major lore bomb, revealing that they'd actually experimented with these transfusions way back in the day. Most people who went through with it died in absolute agony, forcing the practice to be banned, while Amami quietly realized the real killers were likely just mismatched blood types or filthy conditions. He realized that mixing the wrong blood types was a total death sentence, literally causing your cells to explode from the inside out. We're talking a complete body meltdown, violent shaking, gasping for air, and your organs basically screaming in agony. Even with everything we know today, if things go south, you're pretty much a goner. It finally clicked for him. No wonder this was strictly forbidden. Princess Uno was absolutely devastated that even the legendary world tree leaves, supposedly a miracle cure-all, did nothing to save the queen, prompting Amami to start digging for more info. Queen Melina explains that these leaves are pure magic, capable of nuking fevers and erasing pain, which is the exact reason the elves built their entire kingdom around this tree. He picks one up, taking a long sniff as he realizes just how legendary this discovery really is. While geeking out over its chemical makeup, he suddenly had a brain blast and asked if they'd ever tried using the bark instead of the leaves. Princess Yuno looked totally blindsided, admitting they'd never even thought of that. Amami started piecing it together, wondering if this bark was loaded with natural medicine like aspirin or quinine. Alec was absolutely losing his cool, barking at him to spit it out if he actually knew a way to save them. His mom frantically dug through his bag and handed him a small vial of meds, while the dragons and elves watched his every move with suspicious eyes. Inside were aspirin tablets, the ultimate weapon against fevers and pain, and as he explained its powers, he warned them that even though this stuff is insanely effective, but for someone in this queen's state, this was a massive gamble, as it could trigger uncontrollable bleeding and absolutely shred her stomach lining. Amami starts diving deep into the history of medicine, tracing its secrets all the way back to the ancient world. He remembers how the legendary Hippocrates used willow bark to absolutely crush fevers and kill pain. But that raw stuff was brutal on the gut, forcing scientists to evolve it into the aspirin we know today. Amami was on the same page, realizing the elves only used those world tree leaves out of pure desperation. But since they were basically flying blind, he ordered them to stop the treatment immediately before it made the queen even worse. Alec was dying for answers and demanded to know if it was the truth, and while the man confirmed it likely was, he warned that they'd need some real testing to be 100% sure. Losing his cool, Alec desperately begged him for some kind of answer. Amami's mind is racing as he weighs every single possibility. With the queen vomiting blood and passing black stools, he realizes she's got a massive internal bleed somewhere in her upper GI tract. In a perfect world, he'd use an endoscope to dive in, find the leak, and shut it down right then and there. But the dragon folk are just staring in awe, totally convinced he's about to drop some legendary high-level spell. Even Corona is completely baffled, asking him what the heck an endoscope is even supposed to be. Amami breaks it down, explaining that this insane medical tool lets you see right through the body, and even stop internal bleeding if you've got the skills. Princess Yuno is completely stunned, admitting this tech is unlike any magic she's ever encountered, and Amami just shrugs, knowing his knowledge must feel like it's from an entirely different universe to them. Queen Lintworm was barely hanging on, but her mind was still sharp as a tack as she sized him up with pure curiosity. She finally realized why the slime elder was sticking by his side, calling him a total mystery from a world far beyond their own. The mother just stared back, her mind racing as she tried to decode that cryptic message. Lindworm turns to Alec with a hauntingly calm expression and whispers her final goodbye. She was running on absolute fumes at this point. She admitted she wasn't ready to go, but with every escape route closed, she finally braced herself for the end. Alec squeezed her hand, his face soaked in tears as she begged the elven people to forgive her for the absolute chaos she'd unleashed. She squeezed her hand tight for a split second, her knuckles turning white with pure tension. Tears are already starting to flood her eyes as she struggles to keep it together. And just like that, the life drained out of her as her hand fell completely slack. Alex let out a gut-wrenching scream that echoed through every corner of the room. Corona turned toward her mother, her eyes wide with absolute raw desperation. He's practically on his knees, begging for even a shred of hope to fix this nightmare. Amami's brain was firing at 1,000,000 miles an hour as he scrambled for a plan. He was running dangerously low on vasopressin, and he knew this modern acid blocker alone wouldn't be enough to save her. Performing surgery was completely off the table since he didn't have any of his medical gear. There was no way he could just cut the queen open and start digging around blindly. He desperately ran through the medical science in his head to find a solution. When the stomach digests food, it churns out acid that can literally eat through your lining, causing brutal ulcers and reflux. The engine driving all that corrosive acid is something called the gastric proton pump. Modern drugs like vancomycin work by slamming the brakes on that pump, neutralizing the threat before it destroys the body from the inside out. Just then, everything clicked, and his face lit up as the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. The chimera didn't miss a beat, staring him down as it sensed the sudden shift in his energy. Amami's eyes were burning with pure, unshakable determination. He whipped around to face the rest of the squad. He drops a total bombshell, shouting that there might actually be a way to save the queen. Alec clung to his mother's hand for dear life, while Corona's eyes locked onto the woman, a tiny spark of hope finally cutting through the crushing despair. Alec is absolutely shook when he learns there's a way to bring his mom back, but before the mummy gives him the green light, he demands to inspect the wound on Alec's hand. His mom calls it out, realizing Alec actually took that hit while he was still in his massive dragon form. Since this power literally morphs to match his body, it might just be the secret weapon he needs to finally save his mother. Amami doesn't have an endoscope to see what's going on, but since she's a massive dragon, he figures he can just dive right in and operate from the inside. He's diving headfirst into Queen Lintworm's throat to stop the internal bleeding manually while she's still in her massive dragon form. Alec and the queen are left absolutely stunned by his wild proposal, but Amami makes it crystal clear. If they're actually going through with this, he's gonna need every single person on board. Alec snaps back in a fit of rage, flat out refusing because he'll never put his faith in a human again. And there was no way in hell he'd let that thing violate his mother's body. Mommy makes Alec a wild offer. He can watch her every move, and the very second he feels betrayed, he's free to do whatever he wants to her. Alec is absolutely floored by the mother's unshakable grit, and as he salutes her courage, he can't help but ask if there's anything in this world she's actually afraid of. He finally admits it. His greatest fear is watching someone die because he lacked the skill to save them. And that raw honesty leaves Alex completely speechless. Meanwhile, Queen Lintworm is just watching it all with a soft, graceful smile. Deep in the thick of the jungle, Mom and the others are scaling a massive tree. Amami's losing his mind over these never-ending stairs, but Corona keeps him going, promising the observation deck is right within reach. They finally crest the peak, only to find themselves staring out at a massive, wide-open arena. A mother stands there in total awe of its massive size, waving up at Alec and Queen Lintworm. He questions if they really need all this space, but Princess Yuno doubles down, confirming they're gonna need every single inch. The elf hands Amami a coil of rope for the mission, and Amami thanks him, instantly realizing this stuff is tough as nails. Alec locks his gaze onto him, his eyes narrowing as he scrutinizes his every move. His mom brings up that massive razor-sharp blade he was asking for earlier, and Alex doubles down, telling her he's got the whole situation under control. Alex steps up to show them exactly how it's done by. He brutally slices his own hand wide open using his very own horn. He didn't even flinch, just letting the blood drip and splatter onto the cold ground, and he straight up spits on it to add total insult to injury. A blinding light surges through the blood, forging it into a massive sword. Alec kicks the weapon up and hands it over, explaining that this blade was forged from his very own blood and magic, and Amami grips it tight. He saw the absolute fire in Olex's eyes and realized the guy was dead serious. She tells him to patch up his hand, but Alec just ghosts her and walks away, leaving a nearby dragon man to grumble about his attitude while someone else hands a mother a towel. Bursting with curiosity, Amami asks the big question. What exactly is magical power? Queen Lintworm explains that it's a raw force generated by pulling mana right out of the thin air and refining it. But here's the kicker. It changes drastically depending on who or what you are, so there's no one-size-fits-all definition. Take Olex, for example. She points out that he actually pumps his magic straight into that resin he's constantly gnawing on. Amami starts chewing on that thought, trying to wrap her head around the whole concept. He realizes this power is a total enigma, a force that stays shrouded in mystery no matter how deep you dig. Shaking off the doubt, he locks in and prepares to dive headfirst into the danger. With a sharp ring of steel, Amami draws his blade. And just like that, the blade erupts into a roaring inferno! The flames roar to life in a violent explosion, then slowly simmer down until they take a definite shape. Princess Yuno realizes that as a fire dragon, Alec must have sealed his blazing power right into the steel. And this lady is absolutely mesmerized by the weapon, before snapping the blade back into its sheath with a crisp click. He's convinced this blade will totally outclass any ordinary sword, and now that his prep is finally finished, he's ready to roll. He steels his nerves, locking in for the absolute madness about to go down. Alec locks eyes with his mother and gives her a firm, confident nod. Queen Lindworm sheds her human guise and unleashes her true, monstrous form. She rockets straight into the air in a blinding explosion of white smoke, and right before, by erupting into a colossal, mountain-sized dragon. That massive branch beneath her is literally quaking under her weight. Her massive frame towers over the entire crowd, casting a shadow that swallows everyone in sight. Even Mom and the rest of the crew are left completely speechless, staring up in total shock at her massive, god-tier presence. This mother figure is absolutely floored by the insane energy radiating off her, while Corona starts panicking, screaming out for her master. He definitely didn't miss the look of absolute shock on his face. Alex locks his eyes on Amami's smug smile, his gaze sharpening the second Amami prepares to make his move. Mom checks in on Corona, seeing her struggle under the weight of that massive rope, but the girl stubbornly insists she's fine and refuses to stop helping. The nurse tells Queen Lindworm to roll onto her left side, but before she can even move a muscle, something cuts her off. Then, without warning, she's suddenly hacking up a mouthful of blood. That blood hits the ground with a lethal hiss, and she watches in horror as the solid stone floor starts melting like wax. Suddenly it clicks. That's not just blood. It's a cocktail of stomach acid strong enough to melt through solid rock. It hits him that if he'd taken the easy route through her mouth, one gag reflex would have drenched him in that lethal acid, turning him into a puddle instantly. He takes a moment to think about the gag reflex. That brutal biological trigger that makes you hurl the second something hits the back of your throat, and the exact reason why those medical cameras are a total living nightmare. Alec watches with a chilling stare, mocking Amami for being totally clueless about the fact that dragon blood is basically liquid fire. His mom offers an apology but stands her ground, swearing it's way too early to give up, so he presses her for the full scoop on Dragonfoe. Alec is clearly annoyed, but he sucks it up for his mom's sake, and finally agrees to break down the rest of the plan. He drops a heavy warning. Touching the glowing stone in a dragon's throat is a total death sentence, and their stomach acid is so lethal it'll dissolve you the moment you fall in. Mommy takes the warning to heart and shoots him a chillingly polite thank you. Corona yells out, asking where to secure the rope, while Amami gives her major props for working so incredibly fast. He orders her to plant it right under the queen's nose. Corona freezes up the moment she realizes he's actually aiming for the nostril, while Amami's busy justifying this insane move in his head. By snaking the scope right through the nose, they dodge the tongue completely, killing any chance of that annoying gag reflex kicking in. With today's insane tech and HD visuals, this has become the gold standard for checkups. Unless they're hunting for something tiny like early-stage cancer, which needs a much closer look. Corona grips the rope, yanking it tight before letting the heavy bag plummet into the abyss. Everything is finally ready for Amami's insane gamble, as he grabs hold of the rope and signals Corona that it's go time. He lets out a massive huff through his nostrils. He locks into position and gears up to stop the internal bleeding, diving straight in through the nostril. And it slithers deep inside, squirming its way right through his nasal passage. He's practically baking in that sweltering heat when suddenly, a massive wave of water slams right into him. That slime was stalking him the whole time and just launched itself right onto his head. He shoves the little guy away, barking a warning about the danger ahead. But the stubborn slime just hitches a ride as he charges forward. Suddenly, a blinding light bursts into view right in front of them. He squints into the darkness and his eyes widen as he spots those radiant stones lodged deep in the dragon's throat. Olex's warning echoes in his mind. Don't touch them. So he's doing everything he can to steer clear of those pharyngeal walls. He's aiming to dive headfirst right down the beast's throat. But as he gets closer, the light becomes blinding and the heat starts cranking up to a total boil. The slime douses the hot stones with water, creating a massive steam blast that rockets them straight through the entrance. This mom feels the fire and realizes instantly that she's in for a total nightmare, both going down and when it makes its grand exit. Stepping past the glowing stones, they're swallowed by a pitch-black void, where a nervous Amami flicks on his dying penlight to scour the massive cavern. Looking at those gnarly scars, he realizes the queen must have swallowed something scorching in her dragon form, basically giving herself takoyaki ulcers, where the molten food sticks and sizzles your throat. The stomach looms just ahead, but the entrance is a raw, inflamed wreck that screams reflux esophagitis. Amami takes one look at the damage and realizes this isn't just a minor sting. It's a full-blown high-grade disaster. He remembers the nightmare of how this works. Stomach acid surges back up, melting the defenseless throat lining into a landscape of painful ulcers. Amami pushes forward, but he's skeptical. Could simple acid reflux really cause this massive hemorrhaging? He starts racing through the medical grades in his head, Grade N for no change, M for a simple color shift, A for tiny breaks under 5 millimeters, B for the bigger ones, C for breaks that jump between folds, and grade D, the absolute worst, where the damage covers over 75% of the entire circumference. He's trying to make sense of that nasty flare-up when a sudden vibration snaps his head around. His internal muscles start firing off in a rhythmic wave, launching everything in his gut straight back up toward his mouth. As the massive throat convulses, Amami remembers Alex's warning. One slip into that dragon's stomach acid and she's history. He pushes even deeper, struggling against the crushing muscle spasms and skin-melting acid that's trying to dissolve him alive. Chapter 8 kicks off with a heart-pounding moment as that rope outside suddenly starts unspooling at a terrifying speed. Alex spots the sudden jerk and knows instantly that something went wrong, so he white-knuckles the rope to a dead stop while praying everyone's okay. Deep in the queen's gut, he's free-falling through her stomach while watching helplessly as the slime is ripped away from him. He lunges through the air, reaching out with everything he's got to snag it. The slime finally snaps back to reality and reaches back with everything he's got. They barely manage to halt their plunge just inches away from the bubbling stomach acid. They both catch a quick breath of relief, but disaster strikes the second that slime starts to lose its grip. And the mom is still in freefall, plummeting straight toward a lethal splashdown in that pit of acid. That searing liquid is surging right for him, and he knows one touch means certain death as he desperately thrashes in midair. He sets his sights on that patch of dry land nearby and makes a desperate break for it. That slime snatches him up once more, and they barely scramble onto solid ground before Amami trips, nearly face-planting into the dirt. He looks down in horror to see his clothes smoking as stray drops of acid start eating right through his gear. He scrambles to his feet, trembling and shell-shocked, but somehow still in the land of the living. He's thanking his lucky stars he's wearing his everyday gear, since these light threads are the only reason he can even move. If he'd been wearing anything heavier or more restrictive, it would have been game over right then and there. He rushes to check on the slime, and seeing it doesn't have a single scratch, he finally breathes a massive sigh of relief. Our little slime buddy starts frantically flailing its gooey arms, and she gives his cheeks a playful squeeze and decides that just calling him the slime definitely isn't going to cut it anymore. Then it hit him. Queen Lindfirm had specifically called this beast the Elder. He snaps that title tool down to a much more compact and manageable size. The little slime is practically vibrating with joy over his new name. And as his mom lets out a warm laugh, they share a perfect, wholesome moment of connection. Right before, so they pressed on, diving headfirst into the twisting depths of the unknown. Right above them, the end of the rope is swaying just inches away from a boiling pit of stomach acid. Alec is white-knuckling the other end, his face twisted with stress, right as the rope starts lurching forward once more. His anxiety is through the roof, and he's starting to lose it, wondering just how much longer he's stuck in this agonizing limbo. With Elle trailing right behind him, Amami ventures even deeper into the guts, his mind flashing back to the gruesome mechanics of an endoscopy where air is pumped in to stretch the stomach thin. But there's a catch. If that air isn't drained, it becomes a ticking time bomb of agonizing bloating, crashing blood pressure, and a dangerously slow heart rate. That's why modern doctors have ditched it for carbon dioxide, which the body can actually absorb to keep the patient from literally bursting at the seams. Amami scans his surroundings, wondering just how nasty the queen's gut is about to get. When out of nowhere, he feels a sickening squelch beneath his boot, and as he stares down at the mangled, bleeding tissue, it hits him. He's finally found the source of the queen's internal agony. Luckily, it's not acid, so he won't melt, but the stuff is slicker than ice, forcing him to tread very carefully. Out of nowhere, something rips straight through the intestinal wall. A jet of scalding liquid erupts everywhere, and the mother barely manages to leap clear just in the nick of time. The liquid hisses the second it hits the ground, and he realizes with a shock, that's actually blood. The blood is still steaming and bright red, meaning the source has to be right on top of him. He follows the trail, cranes his neck toward the sky, and his eyes lock onto a massive... Suddenly, they notice this massive, creepy growth bulging right out of the wall. It's a tumor, plain and simple. He clocks it instantly as a Yamada Type 4 polyp. Now, the Yamada scale usually just tracks how these things bulge into the stomach. But that nasty, uneven texture proves this thing is way more dangerous than it looks. It was a straight-up malignant tumor, a lethal cancer spreading through the body like wildfire. High above the chaos, Queen Lentverm is putting on a masterclass in keeping a poker face while her world burns. But Alec is absolutely sweating bullets just watching her. He's locked onto her massive dragon form, watching as she shudders way off in the distance. Deep in the shadows of the woods, Krenelson is absolutely seething, spitting curses under his breath at the This rugged, middle-of-nowhere terrain is a total nightmare to navigate, but the lack of roads makes it the perfect place to stay hidden. He's seething that he's even forced to hide in a dump like this, while Sia stops him, demanding to know why their ultimate healing spells and even the world tree's sacred leaves didn't do a damn thing. Krenelson lets out a massive sigh, admitting that even if it's too late to matter, he's finally going to reveal the truth behind that gruesome blood-spewing plague. When fate deals you the ultimate losing hand, there's no cure in the world that can save you, and that monster was just born into a nightmare he could never escape. Saya's mind flashes back to that mysterious crest, the secret source of his absolutely broken healing powers. Krenelson keeps the explanation rolling, noting that while a crest is normally the ultimate cure for this sickness, it's not always a guaranteed fix. Forget trying to measure his power by normal standards. Ekres is a total freak of nature who defies all logic. Normally, when you're dealt a hand this cursed, there is absolutely no coming back. Sios isn't buying it for a second, his mind absolutely refusing to accept defeat. If a crest can pull off a miracle like that, then there's gotta be a solution right within his grasp. But their conversation is slammed shut when the heavy thud of footsteps starts echoing through the trees. Sia catches a glimpse of movement ahead, and suddenly, a pack of ink-black wolves explodes from the forest shadows, charging straight for them. Deep inside Queen Lindworm, Amami is staring down a monstrous tumor clinging to her gut wall. And while the sheer scale is terrifying, he knows he can't just measure it by human standards. He realizes this massive tumor is the smoking gun behind the Queen's life-threatening blood loss and anemia. Luckily, the tumor's stem looks sturdy enough for him to actually make a move on it. There's no second guessing now. That growth has to go. His mind flashes back to the core principles of medicine. At its core, a tumor is just a cluster of rogue cells hijacking the body. But once those cells start invading organs and spreading like wildfire, you're looking at full-blown cancer. In Japanese, the word for cancer is gan, and it can be written using either kanji or hiragana. They might look similar on paper, but the medical distinction between them is massive. The kanji version specifically targets cancers in the outer tissues, like the stomach, lungs, or skin. On the flip side, the hiragana version is the umbrella term for everything else, from bone and muscle sarcomas to leukemia and brain tumors. In a normal hospital, Amami would just use a detachable snare or a clipping tool to choke off the blood supply at the base of the tumor. From there, he'd slice it out with a snare or an electric scalpel, carefully cauterizing any bleeding as he worked. But he's got zero tools on hand, and honestly, even if he did, they'd be way too tiny to handle a monster of this size. Normally, those snares use a plastic loop to squeeze the stem and kill the circulation before removal, preventing a total bloodbath. But this thing is so massive that every standard medical technique is basically useless right now. He realizes that if he's gonna choke out this tumor, he's gotta use that rope. Luckily, the cord is tough enough to survive the blistering heat of the stones. But the real question is, can he pull it tight enough on his own to kill the blood flow? If he can't get a perfect seal, that bleeding is never going to stop. But here's the kicker. His gear is a complete disaster for this situation. This sword isn't some high-tech scalpel that can swap between slicing and searing on the fly. He only packed this one blade, gambling that he'd just be digging out some massive object stuck deep inside. He figured if it was just an ulcer, he'd use the blade's fire to cauterize the wound shut. But now the real question is, can a literal flaming sword actually perform delicate surgery on a tumor? This electric scalpel is a total game changer, letting surgeons flip a switch to swap between clean cuts and instant sealing. Once it's in incision mode, a massive surge of electricity rips through the tissue, superheating it in a split second. This triggers a non-stop chain of tiny vapor explosions deep inside, letting the blade tear through everything in its path like butter. But when they switch to coagulation, the voltage spikes to blast the surface with heat, cauterizing blood vessels and stopping the bleeding dead in its tracks. Amami's heart sinks as the stakes turn deadly. If he can't stop the bleeding, the Queen's already fragile state is a death sentence, and if he fails, his own life is on the chopping block. He's clenching his jaw, practically grinding his teeth to dust. He knows that staying idle is a death sentence for her, and even if he retreats to regroup, there's zero guarantee he'll ever find the gear he needs or even this hidden location, ever again. As the stomach cancer gets worse, the tumor starts tearing open and bleeding out, causing a massive drop in iron that can actually be fatal. On top of that, the swelling gets so bad it literally chokes off the stomach, leaving the body starving because no food can get through. But the real nightmare begins when it spreads to the liver and lungs, trashing the entire body. And at this stage, there's absolutely no time to lose. This mom isn't playing around anymore. Her eyes sharpen with a look of pure, unshakable resolve. He winds the rope around the base of that growth, yanking it taut and locking it down with a rock-solid square knot. He knows this is the ultimate surgical knot. By tying 2 ligatures in opposite directions, he's guaranteed that this thing is never going to slip. Sure, you've got granny, surgeon, and triple knots, but when it's time to stop the bleeding, the square knot is the undisputed king. This mother is pushing herself way past her absolute breaking point. He puts his back into it, yanking that rope tight with every single ounce of strength he's got. He's desperately trying to hold it together, but those wounds just split right back open. He yanks with everything he's got, burying those fibers deep into the base of the growth. The tissue starts turning a nasty shade of purple as he literally chokes the life out of it. He's so close. Just a little more pressure and it's over. His hands are shaking like crazy from the sheer effort of holding on. Sensing he's hitting his limit, El wastes no time, manifesting a conjured hand to help him yank back on that rope. They're pouring every last drop of strength into one final pull, and miraculously those bindings hold firm. The blood stops dead in its tracks as the mission hits its absolute breaking point. And that's when Amami rips out his blade of pure fire and he gives the blade a quick test. It's not exactly a precision electric scalpel, but it'll definitely do the trick. With ice-cold focus and surgical precision, he finally makes his move and starts the incision. The growth is surprisingly soft, making this a slow, agonizingly careful process. Inch by inch, Amami carves through, letting the blade's searing heat cauterize the wound as he pushes deeper. Alex pacing back and forth outside like a caged animal until he finally snaps, slamming his foot into the ground in pure frustration. He's a boiling mess of rage and terror, drowning in the realization that he's completely powerless. Corona catches him and tells him to keep it together, swearing that her master will save his mother with a voice ringing with total, unshakable faith. Alex shoots her a lethal look, demanding to know where this confidence is coming from. Because if that human slips up, she's the one who's gonna pay the price. Corona stands her ground, shouting that her loyalty isn't blind because her master literally saved her life. But Alec just sneers, asking if she ever actually caught that nasty blood-spitting plague. And when she says no, he writes her off completely, dismissing her feelings as nothing but baseless emotion. Queen Melina chimes in, reminding Alec that Amami didn't hesitate for a single second to save Yuno, even though she was a total stranger. Queen Melina, a lifelong friend to Olex's mother, with a bond that defied every border and political scheme, pours her heart out wishing for a miracle recovery. Olex's skepticism finally shatters under the weight of her pure compassion, but even then, his heart is still a total battlefield. Queen Melina sees the raw anger and terror boiling inside him, but she pulls him back, explaining that when things are this desperate, all you've got left is faith and patience. She promises him that his mom isn't facing this nightmare alone. They're all right there fighting tooth and nail alongside her. The atmosphere gets so thick you can practically feel the pressure crushing down on everyone. Out of nowhere, Queen Lintworm's massive frame starts jerking violently. A massive spray of blood erupts from her mouth, staining the dirt red as the entire world goes dead quiet and pure terror takes over. Kicking off Chapter 9, Amami finally finishes the job deep inside Queen Lintworm and slices that tumor free. The entire massive structure shudders before finally snapping completely free. As it crashes down, the very root of that disgusting tumor starts twitching with a life of its own. And just like that, a massive fountain of blood just explodes everywhere. A massive geyser of blood erupts, soaking Amami head to toe as he desperately tries to shield himself from the crimson downpour. Right beneath him, a boiling ocean of stomach acid is churning, just waiting to swallow him whole. He's getting tossed like a rag doll through the creature's guts, slammed by a tidal wave of blood and stomach acid. Outside, Queen Lintworm's body starts thrashing uncontrollably, nearly crushing Corona and the crew as she begins coughing up a literal fountain of blood. The Queen suddenly hits the deck, and the entire crowd goes into a total meltdown. Blood starts pooling on the ground, and that's when the soul-crushing realization finally hits Corona. But his own mother is still trapped deep inside. Alec realizes the stomach acid hasn't even scratched his stone barrier, but the freezing pool of blood sends a deathly chill through him, forcing him to rocket into the air and trigger his massive transformation. He feels his mother's body turning ice cold, and the terrifying realization hits him. If her temperature keeps dropping like this, she's not gonna make it. He wasn't about to just sit on the sidelines and watch it all go down. Alec closes the distance, his eyes locked dead on his mother's throat, and exhales a scorching torrent of fire straight into it. A massive wave of disbelief crashes through the rest of the dragon folk. The black and white dragon brothers scream for him to stand down, desperately reminding him that this isn't the path his mother would have wanted for him. Melina reveals that those backward scales on a dragon's neck are actually mana-sucking vents that keep them alive. But if they get too exhausted, they lose the power to pull in any energy at all. Alec is throwing a total Hail Mary, trying to breathe fire out of pure, raw desperation. He's banking on Fire Dragon mana to bring his mom back from the brink. But this gamble is incredibly lethal. He's literally draining his own life force to keep her going. And if he runs dry, he's going to drop dead right then and there. They're practically begging him to stop, but Alec doesn't give an inch and keeps pushing forward. He's gasping for air, his lungs burning as the sheer strain starts to drain every last drop of his strength. The dragonfolk are desperately pleading for him to stop, terrified that he's about to throw his life away too. But Alec keeps pushing, fueled by a mix of pure desperation and love as he stares down at his mother's cold body, feeling more useless than ever before. But even then, he refuses to back down for a single second. If his mother's soul is still flickering inside her, he's going to put every ounce of his faith in him. If his mother falls, Alec is ready to go down swinging and fight until his very last heartbeat. Meanwhile, Corona offers up a silent prayer, desperately hoping she can somehow pull off a miracle. Deep inside Queen Lintworm, Amami somehow manages to stay alive amidst the absolute madness. Elle is white-knuckling the ceiling of the stomach, barely hanging on for dear life. Once again, that protection kicks in to save his skin right when it counts. That nasty, slick layer of mucus acts like a perfect shield, keeping him safe even as the burning stomach acid tries to melt him down. But that shield is on borrowed time, and as Amami scans the chaos, he realizes his only lifeline has been completely swallowed by the rushing tide of blood. He forces himself into total focus, locking his eyes onto the most critical part of the operation, the tumor's severed stem. Elle starts to make his move, and Amami realizes he caught a lucky break. That diluted stomach acid actually saved him, because if he hadn't been bleeding so much, he never would have been launched to safety. He finally makes it to the very foot of that massive tumor. He watches as the blood keeps trickling out, but the flow is finally starting to sputter. That's a massive red flag. It means Queen Lintworm's blood pressure is absolutely cratering. Her entire body is shutting down as she slips straight into shock. This is a total system failure. When blood pressure craters, your organs stop getting the circulation they need to stay alive, and things get deadly fast. Now, this lethal state breaks down into 4 main types depending on what triggered the collapse. We're talking hypovolemic, cardiogenic, distributive, and the heavy-hitting extracardiac obstructive shock. Tucked inside the hypovolemic category is the terrifying hemorrhagic shock, which kicks in the second you lose 20% of your blood supply. Since blood makes up about 8% of your mass, a 60-kilogram fighter would hit that danger zone after losing just a single liter. Amami realizes it's now or never. He's got to plug that wound while his blood pressure is still low enough to give him a fighting chance. He's got to sear that open artery shut immediately, all while keeping a sharp eye out for any enemies lurking in the shadows. He locks eyes on his blade, snatches it up, and dives straight into the ritual. He's working with insane precision, systematically picking apart every single weak spot on that tumor while he's careful not to go too deep, focusing every bit of his precision on plugging that bleed right at the source. The moment he spots the source, he hammers his blade straight into it, but even with Elle's help and the Queen's strength fading, the massive blowback nearly sends him flying. Back outside, Queen Lintworm jolts awake and starts thrashing around in absolute agony. Corona and the dragonfolk are instantly hit with a massive wave of pure panic. Alec keeps the momentum going, funneling every last drop of his mana into the process. The Queen's power is slipping away, and just like that, Olex is haunted by the echoes of his mother's very last words. She's fading fast, and her body is finally hitting its absolute breaking point. She spits out another spray of blood before passing out cold again, while the black-haired dragon man warns that his Alec's mana is bone dry and he's officially running on fumes. Corona squeezes her eyes shut, pouring every ounce of her soul into a desperate prayer. Amami yanks the blade from the Queen's body, stunned to see that the wound has already stopped bleeding. He realizes that stopping internal bleeding comes down to 2 main moves: mechanical clamping or burning it shut, and he's pulling off both right now with that rope and his flaming sword. Mechanical hemostasis is all about brute force, literally pinching those leaking vessels shut like a high-stakes surgical clamp. Then there's thermocoagulation, where you blast the wound with intense heat to sear the tissue and weld those bleeding vessels closed for good. But he has to be careful. One wrong move or too much heat will burn a hole straight through the stomach, and a perforation like that is a total death sentence. The bleeding finally stops. They actually pulled it off. The emergency surgery is a wrap, and the patient is stable. Totally spent. Elle plummets from the ceiling, but Amami catches him just in time. The little guy is completely out cold after burning through every last drop of his energy. Amami carefully tucks him into his bag, feeling nothing but gratitude for the tiny hero. He spots his penlight in the wreckage, grabbing a tiny win in the middle of all this absolute madness. He's standing in the middle of a gruesome scene, the queen's body soaked in blood while the air chokes with sweltering heat and the acrid smoke of the cauterization. He hacks and wheezes as the thick metallic stench of blood fills his lungs, realizing that with his only rope gone, he's officially trapped, and his mind is starting to spiral. The ground starts quaking all over again, and as a vortex of blood spirals around him, a forgotten memory suddenly flashes through his mind. Okusawa grills Amami, asking if he's actually been heading home on the regular. Amami just groans, swearing up and down that he's been keeping a normal schedule. But Okusawa isn't buying it, pressing him on whether he's getting any real sleep. Amami fires back, claiming he's been getting more than enough rest. Still, Okusawa points out the obvious. His eyes are practically glued shut from pure exhaustion. Following a tense silence, Okusawa finally asks why he's working himself into an early grave, and the question hits Amami so hard he's left completely speechless. Something starts thrashing deep inside Queen Lindworm until she suddenly jolts awake and violently hacks it right out of her mouth. That nasty growth finally gets ripped out and slams into the dirt with a sickening thud. The crowd loses it, gasping in pure terror as they struggle to wrap their heads around the sight. One of the dragon men steps forward, barking at them to explain exactly what that thing is. Alec finally hits his limit and crashes straight to the ground. His colossal dragon body melts away as he finally shifts back into his human form. The dragon folk scramble toward him in a total panic, screaming his name at the top of their lungs. Alec looks up with his last ounce of strength, staring at the massive silhouette of his mother. Queen Lindworm's heavy, labored breathing finally steadies as the tension leaves her giant frame. Alec is shaking with pure dread, his eyes searching frantically for any sign that they're still alive. Corona doesn't waste a single second, lunging straight for Queen Lindworm. Her master is still nowhere to be seen, and as a heavy silence blankets the field, Queen Melina and Princess Yuno trade looks of pure dread. Suddenly, a hand rips right through the queen's mouth, forcing her jaws wide as he drags himself out. Soaked and gasping for air but very much alive, desperately shouting for Corona while clawing his way to freedom. Overwhelmed with relief, Corona's eyes well up as she sprints forward to pull him into a massive hug, with Princess Yuno rushing right behind her. Still on his knees, Alex stares at his mother in pure terror, screaming to know what the hell is happening to her. Right there on the ground sits that disgusting fleshy mass she just spit out. Amami finally drops the truth. That gross thing was the actual tumor that's been rotting Queen Lindworm from the inside out. And somehow, it got dragged out of her body at the exact same time as Alec. With the blockage cleared and the bleeding finally under control, she's officially out of the woods and on the road to recovery. Alex's face finally relaxes, and you can see all that paralyzing fear melt away into pure gratitude. Queen Lindworm is barely clinging to consciousness, but she manages to use her last bit of strength to call out for her son. Her voice is trembling, sure, but it's absolutely overflowing with warmth and relief. Right then, Amami flashes back to that deep talk with Okusawa about why he pushes himself to the absolute limit. And suddenly, his own words start ringing in his head like a wake-up call. To him, there's no greater high than seeing everyone back in peak condition. A faint, bone-tired smile finally breaks across his face. Standing over the recovering Dragon Queen, Amami officially calls it. The operation is over. The internal bleeding is stopped and the tumor is history. The surgery was a total success. Chapter 10 kicks off with a total vibe shift as the elves and every other race gather together for one massive, legendary celebration. Queen Melina and Princess Yuno stand tall before the roaring crowd, just as Melina prepares to send Yuno off on a mission to fetch Amami. Meanwhile, Alec's mother is sticking right by his side, and he's still staying locked in that massive dragon form. Alec incinerates his target with a massive blast of fire, all while his mom watches the spectacle unfold. Amami braves the scorching heat while hunting for his prize, realizing the temperature is finally high enough for those flames to wipe out every last trace of the bacteria he was worried about. The heat was so intense it even fried their scalpel into useless scrap, and as Amami stops to reflect on everything, he's actually weighing the cold, scientific logic behind a mass sterilization plan. We're talking total annihilation, wiping out every single microbe until their survival rate is less than 1 in a freaking million. He realizes this is way beyond your average household cleaner. Those disinfection and antibacterial labels are just child's play in comparison. While disinfection just thins the herd, and antibacterial just stops them from breeding, what he's looking for is a straight-up massacre. He does his best to break down the science, but Corona just can't wrap her head around these tiny germs. And Alec? He's straight-up skeptical. wondering how something you can't even see could possibly be real. Amami knows this world is a far cry from his own, but he's betting they exist here too. And he's not stopping until he finds the cold, hard proof. He gives Alec a massive shout-out for coming through right when he needed him most. But Alec shuts that down immediately, insisting he's the one who's falling behind because Amami's skills make him look like a total amateur. Mami warns Alec to speak up the instant his hand starts throbbing so he can double-check the damage. Just as Alec is showing his appreciation, Amami nearly jumps out of her skin when Princess Yuno suddenly appears, handing over his gear and explaining she did her best to patch it all back together. He's totally flustered and tripping over his thanks. Stunned, she pulled off the repairs solo, but Yuno just brushes his apology aside like it's nothing. She explains that the massive festival is already in full swing, celebrating Queen Lintworm's recovery and the historic peace between dragons and elves, and she insists that Amami's presence is absolutely mandatory. Alec and Corona start nagging him to join in, insisting he's worked way too hard for one day, and Amami finally caves and tags along. Far off in the distance, Mami and Corona keep their eyes glued to the massive castle where the whole festival is popping off and the energy is through the roof. The music is absolutely pumping as a massive, diverse crowd of every race imaginable starts to pack the place out. They're tearing up the dance floor and passing around the grub like there's no tomorrow. Amami's jaw hits the floor as she soaks in the electric energy of a festival where every kind of creature is partying together in total harmony. Princess Yuno's heart practically overflows with joy as she stares up at the revived world tree, watching people from every race finally unite in one massive celebration beneath its branches. Queen Lintworm is right there with them, echoing those exact same feelings. Her voice is pure silk as Amami steps up to pay his respects, while Alec finally lets out a massive sigh of relief, calling out to his mom with nothing but love. Amami's quick to check if Queen Lintworm is actually holding up, but she just gives him a warm smile and promises she's feeling way better now. Everyone put in the work, but let's be real. He's the one who carried the entire squad on his back. Amami leans in for a close look and sees the color returning to her eye, a massive sign her anemia is finally fading, while Alec, practically shaking with nerves, demands to know exactly when she'll be back to 100%. The mummy wavers, admitting he doesn't have a straight answer, and that bombshell leaves Alec and the Queen absolutely floored. He admits that even though the treatment worked, there are two massive wildcards keeping him from predicting what happens next. First off, you've got to realize that a human's recovery is a total world away from how a dragon heals. He points to the chimera as living proof, noting that its wounds healed way faster than any humans ever could. And since Queen Lintworm's anemia is disappearing at that same breakneck speed, it looks like she's packing that same insane recovery power. Corona backs her up, pointing out that even the forest bounced back at lightning speed once the nightmare was over. Then she drops the second bombshell. That tumor Queen Lintworm just coughed up might actually be malignant. He's stuck wondering if it's a lethal cancer devouring her body, or just a harmless growth. But without the right gear, he's flying blind and can't even guess when she'll pull through. He bows his head in regret, telling the Queen that as much as he wants to help, he's totally stumped and can't give her a straight answer yet. Queen Lintworm lets out a soft chuckle, clearly getting a kick out of his nervous apology. She reassures him right away, telling him he's got absolutely nothing to be sorry for. Even if the technical jargon flies over her head, she totally gets the big picture. It all just boils down to a roll of the dice, whether luck is on their side or not. She admits she's already feeling way better, and since she's not the type to just sit around doing nothing, she asks what she can do to get back on her feet even faster. Amami isn't taking any chances and tells her she's got to start hitting up the doctor for regular checkups. He explains that these checkups are the only way to guarantee those healed wounds stay in peak condition and don't turn into a total disaster later on. Corona gets his words all twisted and asks about wriggly checkups, forcing his mom to step in and clarify that he actually meant regular ones. Alec and Queen Lintworm are absolutely floored when they realize Amami plans to dive back into that massive dragon body over and over just for research, and the Queen can't believe a human would willingly endure that kind of torture since the inside of a dragon is basically a living furnace. He apologizes yet again, insisting this is the only way to monitor her recovery, even though he hates putting her through so much pain. The Queen just loses it, erupting into a fit of maniacal laughter. She hails his apology as legendary and praises his insane guts, seeing him as a total oddball who's earned every ounce of her respect. She goes all in, declaring her absolute trust and leaving her entire life squarely in his hands. Since these checkups aren't stopping anytime soon, she lets him know they're going to be spending a lot of time together. She drops the formal act and tells him he can just call her Lin. Amami gives her a heartfelt thanks, calling her by her name for the very first time. Princess Yuno and the rest of the crew just beam as the Queen's stiff attitude completely melts away. Suddenly, a deep voice cuts through the air, noting just how rare it is to see a legendary dragon actually going soft on a human. Princess Yuno wheels around to face the newcomer, Master Normum, who greets her back with a voice dripping with hidden motives. He starts poking the bear, teasing Queen Lintworm about her secret alliances, but she just scoffs, firing back that he's the last person who should be talking about shady deals. She makes it crystal clear that she owes his mother a massive debt, and if so much as a hair on his head is touched, she's coming for blood. She stares him down, calling him out as the former king of the dwarves to make sure he knows she isn't playing games. Normum just scoffs, firing back that he'd expect nothing less than ancient history from a fossilized berserk dragon like her. He admits that if even one tiny thing had gone south, the world tree would have been history, leaving Alec to watch their back and forth in total confusion before he finally turns his focus toward Amami. Norman slides over a massive foaming flagon of beer to kick off the celebration. He shoves the cup forward, bragging that it's the absolute strongest brew in the entire kingdom. Queen Lintworm snaps at him for the stunt, but he just laughs it off, acting like he's just being a generous host. Realizing that turning it down would be a massive buzzkill during such a huge celebration, he takes the glass and knocks back a sip, finding a flavor that's deceptively simple, but packed with hidden complex layers. It doesn't exactly hit him like a truck, though, leaving him wondering if this is really the legendary booze they bragged about. Norman flashes him a massive grin, and he can't help but smile back, realizing it's been a lifetime since he's been able to just kick back and drink like this. Suddenly, a child's voice rings out as Nino comes sprinting up, gasping for air, and Normum immediately apologizes for making the poor kid hunt him down. Nino confirms the truth, scanning the crowd with a look of pure, wide-eyed disbelief. He drops into a deep, formal bow before Princess Yuno, and while she tells him to relax, Nino insists they treat this with gravity, only for Normam to laugh it off and start teasing the kid. His mom just stands back and smiles, loving how the vibe suddenly flipped to pure comedy right in the middle of this massive party. Rain hammered the forest while Krenelson spat a curse under his breath, clearly losing his cool. Things are looking absolutely dire as wolves, dragons, and elves all start closing the trap from every side. Sia was practically on her knees, desperately pleading for Krenelson to unleash his insane regeneration magic. He winces as he touches his own bruised face, realizing she's suffering just as much, and he vows right then and there to heal her. But then he suddenly froze up. He finally confessed he could save her, but he was terrified that burning his ultra-rare purification magic would leave him completely useless. With so much danger lurking in the unknown, they've got to play it smart and save every bit of strength they have left. Sia's eyes screamed unfair, but Krenelson shut her down, snapping that she wasn't even bleeding and trashing her for being a total drama queen. Just a heartbeat later, the wolf pack sniffed them out and closed in. Suddenly, a wolf lunges forward and slams Krenelson straight into the dirt. He just leaves Sia in the dust, completely ignoring her as she screams his name in total desperation. Princess Yuno spotted her friends waving through the festival crowd and wasted no time excusing herself to join the party. Normum gave the word for the dance to begin, and the ladies immediately rose to their feet. Yuno starts hammering her feet against the ground, and the entire squad kicks in right behind her. With every heavy step, blinding rings of light erupted right beneath their feet. Those rings ignite a massive bloom, sending dozens of glowing mushrooms bursting to life all over the world tree as they soak up the elves' raw magic. Normum laid it out plain and simple. Without the elves' power, the world tree is staying pitch black, snuffing out the legendary glow that used to guide every lost traveler home. As Normum detailed the sanctuary the elves had built, Amami couldn't help but stare at his eye patch and the prosthetic on Nino's arm. This place was a total sanctuary for every soul alive, and with the world tree's miracle pain-killing leaves, it became an absolute goldmine that everyone was desperate to control. Norman snapped that even a miracle cure is trash if it can't actually save anyone, and he totally scoffed at the idea of putting his faith in humans. He's left wondering, if healing magic was common, could they have dodged this dark future entirely? He made it crystal clear he was banking on Mommy to come through for him once again. He finally realized that medicine in this world was a completely different beast, and he was only just starting to scratch the surface of its true power. The celebration was instantly cut short as a frantic alarm started screaming through the air. A messenger burst in, shouting at the top of his lungs that a pack of deadly black wolves was closing in fast. A scout came flying in with word that a handful of humans were finally making their move. Those coward healers who bailed earlier got jumped by black wolves in the woods, and now they're leading the entire pack straight into the middle of the festival. The crowd erupted in a total frenzy of rage as Alex swore he'd make them pay, commanding his dragons to take flight while Princess Yuno promised her full support. Even a nearby mother was stunned by the sudden turn to war. but she couldn't ignore the terrifying, raw determination burning in everyone's eyes. Chapter 11 kicks off as a savage pack of black wolves swarms the fortress, hurling themselves against the massive stone walls, but the guards slammed right into them, cutting off their path. A never-ending wave of fur and fangs swarmed up the walls, absolutely shredding the defenses. The black-haired elf fought like a beast to hold the line while the white-haired elf screamed for every backup unit to rush the cave. Massive explosions suddenly rip through the area, sending the wolves scrambling as the entire ground begins to quake. As the world went to hell, a blood-soaked Krenelson choked out a plea to be taken inside, finally dropping the bombshell that he's actually an ordained priest. Just as Alec and the crew arrived, a motherly figure huddled everyone together to deliver a major announcement. With the clock ticking, he was desperate to stop the carnage before another soul was lost. All while Princess Yuno and Alec watched his every move with bated breath. Queen Melina gears her daughter up for battle, warning her that one wrong move could be her last. The princess gave her word she'd make it back in one piece, while Olex stepped up and rallied the entire dragon army under his command. But rage was eating him alive, convinced that the humans' massive egos and their superiority complex were the real reason for this entire catastrophe. He forced Amami to face the brutal reality, that his massive ego was nothing but a one-way ticket to agony and an early grave. She might be a mother figure, but she totally gets why he's absolutely seeing red. He simply couldn't turn his back on anyone suffering right in front of his eyes. Relic flashed back to his mother's voice, echoing the one truth he'd never forget. It doesn't matter who you are or what you've become. That flashback drags him right back to his mother's bedside, where she's hacking her lungs out in a room heavy with the stench of disease. He goes looking for the healing mages, but Queen Linverm drops a bombshell. Those cowards already ditched their posts and jumped right out the window. Alex stood there paralyzed, his blood boiling with a rage he was completely powerless to unleash. Noticing the kid was shaking like a leaf, Queen Lindfirm told Yudo to stop second-guessing himself and just follow his heart. She turns to Alec with the same heavy advice. Dig deep, find what you believe in, and never let it go. The Chimera's massive wings roared to life, catapulting Amami and the crew high into the air. Alec screams out for them to stop as Queen Lindverm watches his heart break, immediately ordering her dragon warriors to shadow Princess Yuno and guard her with their lives. Alec's knuckles turned white as his resolve hardened into pure steel, and he wasn't about to let anyone stop him now. He shifted into a massive dragon and blasted straight into the clouds. Down below, total chaos erupts as a literal tide of wolves swarms the streets, sending the terrified citizens into a frantic scramble for their lives. Hike is fighting like the man possessed, landing a solid strike but getting absolutely shredded in return as the enemy's sheer numbers start to drown him. Captain Manel refused to back down, barking orders for his men to hold the line until backup arrived. And man, talk about a massive sigh of relief. Just then, Princess Yuno and her squad burst onto the scene, tearing through the enemy pack with a massive surge of power. Alec hit the ground like a meteor, slamming right into the heart of the wolf pack with a bone-shaking thud. Suddenly, that massive chimera drops out of the sky and slams down right beside him. Captain Manel's eyes nearly popped out of his head as he recognized him in a heartbeat, while Heath and Hike drop into their knees in absolute awe, hailing him as the literal god of the forest. Alec and the Chimera unleashed a bone-shaking roar, and the sheer force of their power sent those wolves scrambling back into the shadows. Once the dust finally cleared, Phelon rushed over to Manel, who was bruised but still on his feet. Meanwhile, Hike was in bad shape, clutching an arm that had been sliced wide open. Mom drops to her knees to inspect the damage, and she immediately spots something suspicious. Those wild claws are caked in lethal grime, and if you don't treat that wound immediately, a nasty infection is gonna wreck you. He suggested they haul Hyde straight to the castle so the healers could finally get him patched up right. He hesitated for a heartbeat, feeling completely stuck with nowhere else to run. Hike gets the hint and preps for the castle run while the rest of the squad regroups in the eerie silence after the carnage. Captain Manel makes the call, ordering Heath to play bodyguard and get Hike back to safety. Heath doesn't even blink. He's on it instantly. Amami frantically scans the group for wounds. But once Yuno gives the all-clear, she finally lets out a massive sigh of relief, thinking they'd actually survive the nightmare in one piece. But Alec wasn't buying it for a second. He knew the nightmare was just beginning, and he stormed toward a tree while Krenelson, looking down from his high perch, he jeered at the wolves as they turned tail and fled. The vibe flipped instantly as Alec materialized behind him, snatching Krenelson and slamming him down in one fluid motion. Olex's voice dripped with pure rage as he remembered warning that mother that someone was going to get hurt. And now, he was officially done waiting. It was time to handle this himself. He cranked up the pressure, and Krenelson started to lose his mind as the squeeze became absolutely suffocating. His mother was desperately begging him to just put an end to the madness. Alec wavered for a split second, but he refused to loosen his iron grip. Krenelson was absolutely desperate, begging for his life and praying that her motherly instincts would finally kick in. Alec's roar completely drowned him out, leaving Krenelson shrieking in absolute terror. Alec hit his breaking point, demanding to know exactly where the guy was hiding. Krenelson completely locked up, forcing Captain Manel to step in and break the news that he was the only survivor they managed to find. Alec explodes, accusing him of leaving his comrade to be wolf food in a sickening display of human cruelty, and warns Krenelson that if he doesn't lead them to her right now, he's finished. He was ready to end him right then and there. Krenelson's mind is absolutely racing, so he decides to cook up a desperate lie to buy some time, pointing off in a random direction and swearing that's exactly where she's hiding. Alec rocketed into the sky with the chimera hot on his heels as the mother scrambled onto the beast's back, screaming that they couldn't let him get away. Before Alec could add another soul to his body count, following Princess Yuno's orders, Captain Manel joins the crew as the chimera's sword tears through the open sky. They slam down right in the heart of a massive forest. The air was thick, absolutely reeking with the heavy stench of ash. The ground was a charred, smoking wreck as the fire ripped through the clearing. But Captain Manel's blood ran cold when he realized this was the wolves' den, the nursery where they raised their cubs. Suddenly his voice drifts through the air, a faint whisper coming from somewhere right nearby. Alec whips around to find the surviving wolves howling over the charred remains of their pups, while Sia trembles in the brush as the pack claws at the earth just inches away from her. Alex locks eyes on her and yanks her straight out into the open. She was drenched in blood and gasping for air, and looking at her, he knew she was staring death right in the face. Her mother rushed to her side, absolutely frantic. He throws himself between her and Alec, dropping to his knees to check her vitals. But his heart sinks when he finds no pulse and sees her neck vein bulging. He knows exactly how bad this is. She rips her clothes open, baring her chest to reveal the shocking secret hidden underneath. He frantically reaches for his stethoscope. She taps the bell before pressing it hard against her skin, the forest falling dead silent, except for her ragged breathing and the faint crackle of the dying embers. Krenelson was completely floored by Amami's move, while Alec and the crew watched with bated breath as she tuned into the rhythmic echoes of her own lungs. Her breath was fading fast on the right side, a dead giveaway for a collapsed lung. So he barked an order for his medical kit, and Corona came flying in with it just in time. Captain Manel was absolutely livid, barking at Amami to explain what the hell he thought he was doing. He absolutely lost it, screaming that they were abandoning Hike, the man who risked everything for them, just so Mommy could play savior to some random half-dead human girl. Amami took one look at the patient and realized they were officially in a dead sprint against the clock. He barked that she needed emergency care right this second, but Captain Manel was totally baffled by the strange lingo and demanded to know what he meant. When disaster strikes and the casualties start stacking up, the system known as Triage kicks in to bring order to the total carnage. It's a cold, calculated race against the clock, ranking patients by how fast they're fading to decide who gets a shot at survival. One look at their color tag, red, yellow, or green, and their fate is sealed right then and there. Red tags are for the ones hanging by a thread, the critical cases who need help, right now, if they're gonna survive. Yellow tags mark the guys who are pretty banged up, but can still afford to wait for help. Then you've got the green tags, which are strictly for the lucky ones who barely have a scratch. But those black tags are the ultimate death sentence, reserved only for the hopeless cases and those who've already drawn their last breath. Alec pins Krenelson down, forcing a blood-curdling scream out of him as the tension in the room hits a boiling point. Captain Manel watched in silence as Amami stayed ice-cold, meticulously scanning the damage done to Krenelson's body. The captain's blood boiled as he watched Amami patch up the human first, realizing with a bitter sting that this guy cared way more about social rank than actually showing some mercy to the elf. He figured Amami was just another sellout prioritizing the royals over everyone else. But Amami didn't let the judgment stop him and just kept right on grinding. That's when Krenelson reveals a nasty burn on his palm, a brutal reminder that he'd pushed his fire magic way past the breaking point. His mom just shrugged it off as a minor scratch and cold-heartedly turned her back on him. He shifts gears instantly, rushing over to patch up Sire instead. That move left Krenelson and Captain Manel absolutely floored, and the priest immediately started losing his mind in protest. He's absolutely fuming after being pushed to the back burner, but this mommy figure just gives him the total cold shoulder. Amami didn't waste a single heartbeat, instantly zeroing in on the second intercostal space on Sia's chest. He plunges the needle straight in! Air hissed out of her as her eyes snapped wide open, and Krenelson could only watch in absolute disbelief. The mother reveals she's suffering from a collapsed lung, but things take a deadly turn when trapped air starts crushing her heart. spiraling into a life-threatening tension pneumothorax that shuts down her entire blood flow. His split-second save kept her from the brink, buying them just enough time to race back to the castle for some real medical help. Captain Manel was absolutely floored by Amami's insane skills, and suddenly, his old prejudices started to crumble as he wondered what kind of code this guy lived by, and if he could actually be saved. Meanwhile, Krenelson was already scrambling to make a desperate break for it. But Oleg's tail shuts that down instantly, reaching out and snatching him before he can even blink. Pure panic set in, and he started screaming his lungs out for someone to save him. But Amami wasn't budging. He stuck to his triage guns and refused to help him first since his injury was easily the least of their worries. Captain Manel barks at Amami, demanding to know what the hell he's planning for Krenelson. Amami finally caves, admitting he was hoping to drag him back and patch him up when things calmed down. But the captain's icy glare made it crystal clear. He didn't trust this guy for a single second. He just couldn't wrap his head around her motherly logic. Why the hell was she busting her back to save everyone, even the absolute scumbags? Amami hangs his head, finally owning up to the fact that he was just being a selfish jerk. But there was no way he was walking away. Not while there was even a shred of hope left to save a single soul. Back at the castle, the kitchens are in total chaos as a massive feast gets whipped up while Queen Melina immediately jumped into action, meticulously scrubbing the filth from his mangled arm to keep the infection at bay. Meanwhile, Princess Yuno was frantically brewing a potent tea from world tree leaves, praying its magic could finally kill the agonizing pain. The air was thick with a heavy, desperate silence as everyone scrambled to get things under control. But then, Mom steps onto the scene and immediately starts calling the shots like a total boss. He barked an order to get the wounded guy onto the nearest bed, and he broke the news that she was finally out of the woods, confirming her condition was holding steady. She just needed to stay still, so he dropped everything to make her recovery his absolute top priority. Mommy leaned in close, her eyes narrowing as she carefully inspected the nasty injury. He notices the bandage looks fresh, but the wound itself is a total disaster. Turns out nobody even bothered to disinfect it. The cup next to him reeks of world tree leaves, making him realize that in this world, they only care about numbing the pain instead of stopping infection. So he keeps his eyes glued to Hikes, watching for the slightest hint of a grimace. He could tell the guy was just acting tough, but the sheer agony he was hiding had to be absolutely brutal. Amami immediately barked orders at Corona to get some sterile water ready for the procedure. He scrubbed the wound clean and numbed the area, getting everything ready for the next phase of the operation. Then, in another absolute shocker, he actually carves the wound even wider. Queen Melina, Unagast, and Captain Manel were absolutely losing it, unable to wrap their heads around why a mother would turn a lethal wound into something even more gruesome. Amami's mind raced through the brutal logic of surgery. You have to cut away the rot to let the body heal, because he knew that leaving dead tissue was just an invitation for infection, meaning he had to slice it all out, no matter how gruesome it looked. The air was so thick you could cut it with a blade until Princess Yuno finally stepped in to give Captain Manel a serious reality check. Amami had already flexed his insane skills and proved his heart was in the right place. Corona backed her up, loudly boasting that her master was a total legend, even if she looked pretty conflicted about admitting it. Captain Manel handed off the responsibility to the mom, while Corona helped him gear up with his gloves and the mom broke out some plastic scissors too. "He's got to slice away the rot before it spreads!" Hike's eyes shot wide open in absolute shock. But Amami didn't miss a beat, staying locked in and dismantling everything with surgical precision. Once the nasty cleanup was finally over, he gave the wound one last scrub, slathered on some ointment, and tightly bound it up in fresh bandages. He gave them his word that Hike's wound was finally going to heal up the right way, but he's staying glued to their side, keeping a hawk eye on things until they've made a full recovery. The tension finally drains from his face as he lets out a massive sigh of relief. Captain Manel stood there in stunned silence, his mind racing as he replayed every insane detail of the madness he'd just witnessed. This Amami magic was like nothing they'd ever seen. A masterclass of elite skill and razor-sharp precision, all fueled by pure heart. This mother clearly didn't give a damn about rank when it came to saving lives, and seeing that level of selflessness hit the captain like a ton of bricks. And honestly, he couldn't even help but let a tiny, subtle smirk slip onto his face. Queen Melina catches the vibe and flashes a knowing smile of her own. He wastes no time moving to the next critical case, explaining that since air is still crushing her chest, he's going to insert a tube to reinflate the lung. If that doesn't do the trick, he's ready to perform pleurodesis to literally fuse the lung to the chest wall, recalling how doctors back in his world would use everything from antibiotics to the patient's own blood to pull it off. As Queen Melina watched him work, her mind was finally made up. She turned to Princess Yuno and declared that Amami officially had a place waiting for him at the World Tree. That one simple move said it all. They finally respected and welcomed the outsider doctor who'd changed their world forever with his god-tier healing powers. Deep in the shadows of a grim dungeon, Krenelson sat trapped behind bars pulsing with ancient enchantments. This cell was a masterpiece of cruelty, specifically engineered to suffocate every last drop of his magic. It didn't matter if he used brute strength or his deadliest spells, nothing was breaking out of this literal fortress. The atmosphere was absolutely suffocating as he finally snapped, letting out a roar of pure fury. His ego as a holy priest was absolutely smoldering with rage. He couldn't stomach the sheer disrespect of being thrown behind bars by a pack of dragonfolk. He absolutely lost it, screaming about the injustice and howling that his mother's fate was unavoidable, claiming he didn't have a drop of blood on his hands. To him, this whole thing was a sick joke that could only be settled with a total, all-out war. But outside the bars, Alex didn't even flinch, his face a mask of icy, unshakable resolve. The dragonfolk guards stood there in deathly silence, their faces boiling with suppressed rage after Krenelson basically called them nothing more than overcooked lizard kebabs. Alec didn't even blink, staring the priest down with pure ice in his veins. He looked at the man with total disgust, knowing nobody on the planet would ever dream of risking their life for a snake like him. Honestly, the only reason Krenelson was still drawing breath was because Alec didn't think he was even worth the effort to finish off. Now that his mom was finally on the mend, Alec was locked, loaded, and ready to throw down with anyone who dared to cross him. Out of nowhere, Alec lets loose a devastating punch that lands square on Krenelson's jaw. The impact landed with a thunderous crack that sent shockwaves echoing off the prison walls. The priest gets sent flying, slamming into the stone wall with a heavy thud. Oleg's eyes burn with a dark sense of satisfaction as he promises cold-blooded revenge, warning that the lousiest hand Krenelson mentioned is finally coming for him, and it's bringing a mountain of regret with it. Meanwhile, Sai is out cold and breathing easy, totally oblivious to the absolute chaos about to explode right outside her door. Deep in the human territories, a messenger drops to his knees before Archbishop Ikris. The air in the Great Hall is thick with tension as the news breaks. It's about the priest and Deacon Ekris sent on that mission to the World Tree. They'd completely ditched their sacred duties as healers, only to get hauled off in chains moments later. A bombshell that was guaranteed to send shockwaves through the church and every kingdom in the land. Queen Lindworm raps on the door, and after a warm welcome from Princess Yuno and Queen Melina, Melina thanks her for showing up and declares the meeting officially in session. Back at the camp, Sia is still desperately clinging to life. She's got a tube jammed into her chest to drain out all that trapped air and fluid. A brutal process called thoracic drainage. In a real hospital, you'd use a sophisticated 3-bottle system for something like this. You need 1 bottle to catch the fluid, a second to seal out the air, and a third to keep the suction steady. But Amami is stuck in the middle of nowhere without any of that fancy equipment. So he improvises like a total genius, rigging up just 2 bottles and using gravity to pull off a siphon effect. It's definitely not high-tech, but it's doing the job. Back at the summit, Melina didn't pull any punches, asking Lindworm point-blank if their alliance was still rock solid. Lindworm flashed a faint smile as the chaos finally settled, deciding to let Olex off the hook while apologizing for the absolute mess they'd been dragged into and confirming that she was finally bouncing back and getting her strength back. Melina looked her in the eye, swearing that her health was the only thing that truly mattered. As for all that old drama, it was time to bury it in the past for good. That's when Lindworm steps in, dropping a total game-changer of an idea. The dragons were already bound by an ancient oath to guard the elven realm, but she threw a massive curveball by demanding they protect her mommy too, leaving Prime Minister Mayad completely caught off guard. She tentatively asks the real question. Are they actually protecting this guy, or are they just keeping him locked up so he doesn't go on a rampage? Lindworm just shakes her head, knowing they'll never reach a decision if they keep overthinking. But let's be real. If Princess Yuno hadn't brought a mommy into the picture, they'd be in serious trouble. Who knows what kind of disaster is lurking out there? Honestly, I just want him to stay. And maybe that's for my own selfish reasons, she admits with a faint, knowing smile. Princess Yuno didn't waste a single heartbeat, desperate to keep her mother from leaving her side. Queen Melina nodded, realizing he'd been the one to save Yuno too. And Yuno didn't hesitate for a second, confirming it with absolute conviction. Melina flashes a grin and gives the green light, officially bringing it into the fold. But Mom's staying right where she belongs, safe inside the World Tree Cave. Prime Minister Mayad didn't waste a second and started scribbling every single detail down. But Melina put a hard stop to the talk, shouting, "Wait! We're literally mapping out his entire life without his input. So let's hear what the man himself actually thinks. And Maya just bowed and rushed off to go grab him immediately. Corona rushes over to see if SIA is still hanging in there. He's dead silent, straining his ears to catch the faint rhythm of her every breath. She catches the rhythm of Saya's heart, but then her eyes widen as she hears it. A second, mysterious pulse thumping from the right side of her chest. The mother snatches the stethoscope and leans in, listening with laser focus to catch every single beat. He confirms her right lung is breathing easy, and Corona knows that sound by heart. It's the ultimate sign that Sia is finally pulling through. But if that sound cuts out, they'll have to drain the air and redo the entire procedure just to keep it from coming back, while Corona snatches her stethoscope back. Saya's eyes flutter open as she processes the orders, and Amami realizes right then and there, she's finally back in the land of the living. Alec finally steps out from the shadows, and man, he looks absolutely stone-faced after watching the whole thing go down. And it's enough to make Sia jump right out of her skin. Her mom drops the bombshell, revealing that Alec was the hero who actually tracked her down and saved her life. Alex is visibly shaken by his own outburst, but a motherly figure steps in to remind Sia that while she's making massive strides, she's still got a long road to full recovery. Saya's running on fumes but still manages a heartfelt thank you to Amami, while Alec gets lost in his own head, realizing the massive weight of the convictions he has to carry forward. Sia shoots him a quick look and makes sure he knows just how much she appreciates him too. Alec freezes right there, caught in a split second of pure doubt. You could see the crushing weight of a silent heartbreak drowning his eyes. Amami catches the look on his face and asks what's up, but Alex plays it cool, casually mentioning he was just wondering if Amami was free to grab a drink later. His mom apologizes, saying he's too busy to see him right now and they'll have to catch up later. So Alec just turns and walks out in total silence. Corona is completely locked onto the stethoscope in her hands, and when a mom asks what's on her mind, she wonders if she's even worthy of wielding such a legendary piece of gear. He's flashing back to the insane history of the stethoscope, starting with Hippocrates in ancient Greece, who literally had to jam his ear against a patient's chest just to hear a heartbeat. That primitive method stayed the same for centuries until 1816, when René Laennec revolutionized medicine by rolling up a simple paper tube to listen to a patient's lungs. Finally, George Kamen stepped in to develop the binaural design, giving us the iconic two-ear tool that every modern doctor uses today. Mom gives Corona the green light to use it, and he's already dreaming of the day he can gift her a stethoscope of her very own. Corona's eyes go wide as she asks if it's really all for her, and her mom confirms it, reminding her of the heavy promise he made to her grandfather. Since they've only got one stethoscope between them, he asks her if they can double up and share it for now. Corona's face lights up as she agrees instantly, showering him with thanks while Amami flashes a warm smile right back at her. He realizes they're totally bone dry on supplies. No gear, no meds, and not even a single stethoscope to go around. They're gonna have to forge every piece of medical tech from absolute zero, one painstaking step at a time. But right as the weight of the situation hits him, a voice rings out, desperately asking if Amami is there. Amami's head snaps up in shock as Prime Minister Mayad struts into the room, introducing herself as Queen Melina's right hand and saying she's absolutely thrilled to finally meet him in person. His eyes nearly bulge out of his head in total shock as he frantically begs to borrow a pair of glasses on the spot. Mayad is totally lost, staring back with a look of pure confusion. Amami leans in for a closer look at Mayad's glasses, and his face instantly explodes with excitement. These aren't just frames. They've got real, functional lenses. He bursts into a wild laugh, his mind racing with all the game-changing possibilities this discovery unlocks. Corona watches the madness unfold, asking if these lenses are some kind of legendary tool. Amami nods like a madman, confirming her suspicions. You better believe they are. Tucked away in the corner, Mayad turns bright red, totally flustered by his sudden burst of energy. Realizing he went way too far, Amami quickly apologizes, while a flustered Mayad stammers that it's no big deal, as long as he hands those items back. After that, Mayad marches Amami right into the heart of the royal meeting room. She announces to the whole council that she's finally tracked him down. Amami just smirks, telling everyone the timing couldn't be more perfect. Turns out he was actually dying to have a little chat with them himself. Princess Yuno catches Mayad's bright red face, but she decides to play it cool and keep her mouth shut. Queen Melina demands to know what's on her mind, and after a heavy sigh, Mommy reveals that it's all about the state of the injured patient. Their lungs are finally healing and the gashes are closing up, but he's still sweating bullets over a nasty infection, or worse, rabies from those wolf fangs. Princess Yuno is completely lost, so our guy breaks down the terrifying reality of rabies. A lethal virus passed through animal bites that's a guaranteed death sentence once the symptoms kick in. He explains that while Japan wiped the disease out decades ago, it still hitches a ride back with travelers, but the real silver lining is the 1 to 3 month incubation period where a quick vaccine can still save your life. Queen Lindworm's face darkens as she warns him that he's walking straight into a death trap. Amami's down, but he's not even sure if rabies is a thing in this world. Still, with so many different species living side by side, he knows it's way better to be safe than sorry. Mayad presses him, wanting to know exactly what his game plan is for the training ahead. Amami decides to keep a close eye on the 2 wounded patients while he scours the town for any local legends or old-school myths about people showing those terrifying rabies-like symptoms. He starts to apologize for asking for so much, but Queen Melina cuts him off, making it clear they trust his instincts completely. She whirls back to the rest of the group and announces that it's finally time to decide on his reward. One of the moms looks completely baffled. Wait, a reward? Queen Melina just flashes a knowing smirk. You'd better believe it. This guy has taken better care of her people than the most elite magic healers money could buy. It's only fair to pay him back for all that hard work, both for right now and for what's coming next. The mom's eyes practically pop out of her head. He just waves them off, flat out refusing to take a single cent because he's doing this purely to help. Besides, they're already hooking him up with a warm bed, hot meals, and every resource he's asked for, which is honestly more than enough. Queen Lindworm arches an eyebrow and starts teasing him, asking if he really thinks her life is so cheap that it doesn't even deserve a reward. Talk about a low blow! Panicking, his mom jumps in to play damage control, desperately swearing that he didn't mean it like that. After a quick pause, he reveals a legend from his world about the Koishikawa Hospital, founded by a visionary named Shosen Ogawa, who believed that even the poorest souls deserved a chance to be healed. Melina flashes a knowing grin, realizing she wants to build a massive hospital right here where absolutely anyone can get the help they need. Amami nods with total conviction, revealing his dream to build a sanctuary at the World Tree, where anyone can get the medical care they need. He admits that in a world where medicine is basically a myth, his goal might sound insane or even arrogant, but he's dead set on making this impossible vision a reality. For a split second, the entire room goes dead silent. Queen Lindworm lets out a soft chuckle, admitting she can always count on Samami to be shamelessly greedy when it comes to saving lives. Queen Melina beams with a warm smile, clearly touched by the sentiment. But then, Prime Minister Mayad politely raises her hand to break the mood. She apologizes for jumping in, but points out there's one small detail they haven't considered yet. Melina asks what's on her mind, and Mayad gets straight to the point. She knows Corona is Amami's apprentice and wants him to share those legendary healing secrets with the elves, a request Amami accepts in a heartbeat. Mayad's eyes go wide in total shock, barely believing her own ears as she tries to give him an out, saying she'd totally get it if he kept his secrets. But wait, did he seriously just say yes? Amami just gives her a firm nod, confirming that he's really going through with it. He breaks it down for them. His 2 hands can't be everywhere at once, so the more people he trains to heal, the more lives they can actually save. Mayad's jaw hits the floor as Princess Yuno bolts to her feet, absolutely desperate to dive into the training herself. Queen Melina gives the green light, vowing to build a sanctuary for the sick right then and there. And while one mother sighs in relief, she suddenly remembers to ask what they actually came to talk to him about. Back in the human kingdom, a bishop leans over a dying girl, muttering a low prayer while his hand hovers right over her bleeding wound. His mangled skin slowly begins to crawl and stitch itself back together. Her jaw drops in total disbelief as she bursts into tears, seeing that her leg has been completely restored. The bishop warns her that curses have a nasty habit of sticking around, so if she feels that wound start burning again, she better down that holy water he gave her. She showers him with gratitude, pressing a few coins into his palm before finally heading out. A bystander is absolutely floored, calling the bishop a straight-up miracle worker for fixing that gruesome wound so easily. But Arch just brushes it off, claiming it's nothing but the power of faith and prayer. The guy just scoffs, wondering if a lowly wretch like her even deserves a miracle, especially since Arch gave her holy water blessed by Master Ikris himself. But Arch just glares back, reminding him that in the eyes of God, every soul is equal. He makes it crystal clear that other races and half-breeds don't count, sending the whole group into a fit of nasty, mocking laughter. He mocks her, joking that the holy water is probably just cheap juice from some peasant's farm, making it the perfect drink for a lowlife like her. Another guy joins in, questioning why Master Akres even bothers calling it holy if it's such garbage. But the trash talk is cut short when a messenger suddenly bursts through the doors. He drops to a bow and delivers the bombshell. Archbishop Akres has officially summoned Bishop Arch to the Holy See, and he needs to move now. Archer's face turns to stone at the mention of Master Acres, and with a grim nod, he makes it clear he's ready for whatever comes next. Bishop Arch is striding through the echoing halls of the Holy See when a voice suddenly rings out, asking if he was summoned here too. He whips his head around and spots Sol and Comet charging right toward him. Arch leans in, asking if they've actually heard the insane rumors going around. Sol just shrugs, totally clueless, while Comet lets out a bitter scoff, wondering if this is just another fake publicity stunt for some rich sponsor, just like that disgusting job they were forced to pull for a slave trader. He storms off in a total huff, leaving Sol to sigh and joke about how moody comets are at that age, while Archfron starts putting the pieces together. If he, Sol, and Comet are all here, could Archbishop Ekris be gathering every single one of the 6 stars? Sol just shrugs it off, saying Mio's a definite no-show since she's notorious for ghosting everyone the moment her experiments get intense. Arch blinks. Yeah, we're talking full-blown experiments here. Sol breaks it down. She's talking about medical treatments that don't turn a single cent of profit. Before they know it, the group finally arrives at the meeting room. Once inside, FIA welcomes them with a massive smile as Zess stands tall by her side, and Arch wastes no time returning the friendly greeting. Suddenly, the doors fly open and Archbishop Ikres strides in, his sheer presence instantly silencing the room as he scans the 6 stars, the absolute deadliest healers the Holy Church has to offer, before thanking them all for answering the call. One of our holy healers has been a total fraud, pocketing gold while ditching his duties, but he finally got busted at the World Tree, and after letting the weight of that sink in, he drops the name. It's the ordained priest Krenelson. The crowd starts buzzing with nervous energy, but his gaze turns ice cold as he doubles down, warning them that they're in deep trouble and need to move fast to crush this threat before it spirals, because if their sacred healing magic leaks out, it's game over. The 6 stars trade looks of pure dread, all of them haunted by the same thought. With Krenelson snatched at the World Tree, everything is about to go south. He's scratching his head, completely stumped as he tries to wrap his brain around the situation. Corona watches him with deep concern and calls his name, snapping Amami back to reality as he quickly stammers out an apology. Alex strolls in cool as a cucumber, asking if the rumors are true about Amami cooking something up, and Amami confirms he's spot on. He starts hyping up Corona for being a total legend, while a mother explains his grand vision. He's building a massive hospital where literally anyone can get healed, no matter who they are or what happened to them. He admits he's racing against the clock, but before he goes, he shows off a sketch he's been prepping for the hospital, and when Alec catches a glimpse of the detailed figure, he asks if it's a portrait of his mother. His mom sets the record straight. He's actually on a mission to write a brand new masterpiece on human anatomy. Back in 1774, the legendary Kaidai Shinsho exploded onto the scene, marking the first time Western medical secrets were officially translated for Japan. Everyone thinks it's just a simple translation of Ont Lied Kundige Tafeln, but it was actually a massive mashup of cutting-edge research from heavy hitters like Thomas Bartholin and Stephen Blankhart. Even the cover art was a total flex, ripped straight from the iconic illustrations of Juan Valverde de Amusco. Amami reveals his book is actually a master guide of anatomy, and after getting the insane chance to treat a dragon, he's determined to map out its biology so healers like Corona have a blueprint for the future. Though he's still got a long way to go before it's finished. He finally comes clean. He doesn't have the gear or the supplies to pull this off, leaving him in a total nightmare scenario. He's still cringing over his total failure to make soap, and Alec definitely hasn't forgotten that disaster either. That night, a stomach-churning stench completely choked the air. His mother scrambled to apologize, insisting he'd just made some kind of huge mistake. Alec bolted away from the rot, screaming in absolute disgust as he fled. Queen Melina ripped into him, demanding to know what on earth he was doing out so late to cause such a horrific stench. Amami looks back on that disaster of an experiment with nothing but pure regret. He'd attempted to craft soap by fusing animal fat with plant ash to brew lye, then topped it off with salt. He's definitely no master chemist, but he knew those ingredients should have done the trick. He knows the secret. Soap is a surfactant, packing molecules that love water on one end and oil on the other. This double-sided power forces water and oil to finally play nice, grabbing onto dirt and ripping it away. By flushing out nasty bacteria and viruses, soap acts as the ultimate disinfectant. Some specialized versions, like medicinal or inverted soaps, go even further by straight-up sterilizing everything they touch. But soap isn't just a tool. Its history goes back ages. It landed in Japan during the Azuchi Momoyama era in the late 1500s, but the recipe was perfected long before that. We're talking ancient history. A Sumerian clay tablet from 300 BC actually proves they were using it way back then. There's even a crazy Roman legend about Mount Sapo, a place where sheep were sacrificed in ritual fires. Animal fat mixed with wood ash and soaked into the earth, creating a magical sludge that could clean anything. Corona is absolutely hyped to try this soap thing for the first time, but she's still skeptical if it's actually better than just using water. Amami shuts down her doubts, explaining that staying clean isn't just for show. It's the ultimate secret weapon for dodging diseases and staying healthy. Without hospitals, checkup rooms, or even basic medical knowledge, this new mom's list of must-haves is basically a mile long. But here's his biggest nightmare. He's running on fumes. He's burned through almost every scrap of gear he brought from home, and in this world there's no such thing as a restock. Alec and Corona trade a worried glance as the tension hits a boiling point, so Alec finally sighs and promises to hear out Amami's venting later. But first, they're hitting the bar to take the edge off. Alec leads Amami and Corona into a local tavern to meet Tiga, a literal dragon behind the bar who greets the crew with a massive friendly welcome. Alec brags that he finally dragged Amami along, and while Amami keeps it classy with a polite greeting, Tiga's eyes light up the second he sees him. He barks orders at his crew to push past their limits and break out the top-shelf booze for their guests, sending one of the dragon workers scrambling to get it done. Amami drops the news that he barely ever touches alcohol, leaving Alec shocked and wondering if he's just a total lightweight. But when Amami explains that's not the reason, Tiga jumps in, suggesting that if booze isn't his vibe, he suggests trying a special drink called Itali from the upstairs bar. But both the mother and Corona are left scratching their heads in total confusion, at least until a booming voice suddenly roars out from across the room. "It's Normum, an old-school regular who's been a familiar face around here for ages." He snaps at Tiga to quit pushing his shady deals on the rookies, before immediately barking for another stiff drink. A dragon attendant tops off his glass, and Normum gives him a quick nod of thanks. He then pivots to Amami, warning him to steer clear of that Ideal garbage and stick to real liquor, before offering to buy the next round and telling him to bottoms up. Alex snaps at the old man for butting in, but Amami actually appreciates the gesture and takes a swig, only to realize the drink is totally lukewarm. Normum asks for his verdict, and Amami admits it's actually pretty refreshing, though it hits way different than anything he's had before. It even reminds him of beer, which cracks Normum up as he explains the drink is actually called Calwicia. Amami's totally right about the switch. The last one was just fruit, but this new batch is brewed straight from grain. Amami instantly recognizes the brew, explaining that back in his world, people love drinking beer ice cold, a concept that completely blows Norman's mind, but leaves Alex so intrigued he demands Tiga give them a live demonstration. Tiga flexes a bit of frost magic, turning that cup ice cold in the blink of an eye. He hands it off to Alec, leaving Amami and Corona absolutely floored by the spectacle, while Norman starts begging for his turn to try it out. One sip in and his eyes practically pop out of his head in total shock. He downs the whole thing in one shot and slams the cup down, totally fired up. He shouts about how incredible it is, while Alec just shakes his head, noting that the guy's hype levels are still cranked to the max. Norman starts getting all poetic, admitting that while he used to think liquor was like a peaceful sunset over the fields, he now realizes it's more like a high-speed rush down a glittering avalanche of gold. He turns back to the mother, pressing her to see if she's got any more secrets left to spill. Amami plays it humble, but he starts dropping pro tips on how mixing spirits with fruit or juice can create some seriously tasty results. Norman is totally hooked, swearing he'll try it next time while practically begging for more expert ideas. But Alec isn't buying it. He gives Amami a suspicious side-eye, wondering how a supposed non-drinker knows so much about the bar scene. Amami finally spills the beans, admitting that back in the day, he was a total whiskey connoisseur who preferred the hard stuff over a simple beer. Norman's curiosity is officially piqued, and he demands to know exactly what this whiskey stuff is all about. Mom steps in to give a full-blown masterclass on how whiskey is distilled into perfection. They're boiling it down and catching the vapor to strip away the weak stuff, leaving behind a high-voltage brew that packs a serious punch. Norman is totally hooked, shouting that he's got to hear every single detail. Alex steps in to shut Norman down, telling him to quit pestering Amami because they're here to kick back, not talk business. Norman fires back with everything he's got, screaming that this information is way too important to ignore. He declares that their people have spent generations mastering the craft, and that brewing the perfect drink is the only way to build a brighter future for everyone. The two keep screaming at each other until Alec finally loses it, snatching the old man by his hair as Normum howls in protest. Amami starts geeking out, his brain already spinning with the massive scientific potential of this discovery. He realizes that if he keeps distilling this stuff, he'll end up with pure ethanol, the perfect medical-grade disinfectant for his work. But just as the shouting match is about to boil over, Tiga steps in to shut it down. He offers a quick apology before unleashing his ice magic, flash freezing the room and forcing everyone to literally chill out. The sudden icy blast sends a massive shiver straight down Amami's spine. Once the dust finally settles, Norman figures that since they're already deep in strategy, he might as well spill the beans. But he's not done yet. He's got one more favor to ask. And while Amami is intrigued, she's already betting he's just gonna nerd out over distillation again. But Norman just shakes his head, explaining that while he's definitely interested, his real priority is getting her to check in on his grandson whenever she's got a spare moment. Amami is caught completely off guard, finally seeing past Norman's loudmouthed act to the genuine heart hidden underneath. Norman's worried sick about his grandson's constant stomach aches and bathroom struggles, but Amami takes one look and realizes it's just a textbook case of constipation. Norman brushes it off like it's no big deal, telling him to just swing by whenever he's free, and he's so grateful for his grandson's rescue that he promises to craft him absolutely anything he wants. Amami is totally stunned, but Norman just beams with pride, boasting that dwarves can forge anything imaginable since their smithing skills are legendary across the world. Amami is seriously floored and insists on paying for a real commission instead of taking a handout. But Norman stands his ground, claiming work this legendary is his gift of gratitude. Right before Alec jumps in to start roasting him. Alec eyes the massive pile of empty mugs and questions if the old dwarf can even cover the tab. But Norman just snarls that he's good for the gold and tells the kid to watch his mouth. Scanning the room, Corona asks if the dragonfolk are stuck working this bar. But Alec explains they're actually stationed in way grittier spots, like the infamous Itali Den just upstairs. When Mommy gets curious and asks about Itale, Normam shuts him down instantly, warning that he's seen way too many lives go up in smoke. But Alec fires back, arguing that some people need it to survive just like alcohol, and calling out Normam's blatant hypocrisy. Amami notices them puffing on Itel, and wonders if it's basically just tobacco. So Alec tells him to go see for himself, completely ignoring Norman's frantic begging as he leads the way straight upstairs. They step into a shadowy room heavy with a bizarrely sweet aroma, and right behind the counter is Shia, welcoming Alec back with that same old nickname. She invites him in and asks if he's lighting up tonight. But Norman's loudmouthed refusal forces Shia to frantically shut him up. She shuts him down fast, reminding him that loud mouths annoy the customers, and fire is a total no-go inside, leaving Norman to just grumble under his breath. He snaps that she definitely heard the shouting downstairs, but Alex steps in, promising Shia they're only there to watch, so she gives a quick nod and waves them inside. Inside, the room is jam-packed with people huddled in every corner and lounging lazily across the cushions. He takes a deep hit from a bizarre glass pipe, and as the smoke begins to swirl, he lets out a ragged cough before slumping back into a total trance. Mom scans the scene and realizes she's finally face-to-face with Ideal, and Alex steps up to confirm she's 100% right. He points out that this place is definitely no vacation spot. Nobody ever comes here just for the fun of it. She spots the hollow, dead look in the smoker's eyes and the deep lines of exhaustion proving they're pushed way past their breaking point. Shia drops a bombshell. Idael, also known as God's Sigh, nukes the kind of agony that even the world tree's legendary leaves can't touch. It grants people a temporary escape, letting them finally forget their crushing misery. It buys them just enough peace to shut their eyes and get some actual sleep. According to her, that desperate need for relief is exactly why they can't live without it. The mother hangs on every word, her jaw hitting the floor as the weight of this truth finally sinks in. It hits him that this stuff doesn't just get you wasted. It's a straight-up anesthetic that kills every ounce of pain. His mind goes into overdrive as he connects the dots to his past life's medical expertise, totally floored by the idea that a single breath could completely shut down pain. He realizes this isn't just some cool trick. It's a total game changer that could revolutionize medicine forever. If they play it smart and test this stuff out, it could be the perfect way to knock someone out cold. He's hunting for a vital surgical tool while flashes of scientific history start racing through his mind. He flashes back to 1772, when a chemist named Joseph Priestley stumbled onto nitrous oxide, the ultimate euphoria-inducing gas. While kids were using it as a cheap way to get hammered, doctors realized it was a total game-changer for numbing pain. And just like that, general anesthesia was born. Deep in the human realm, right inside the chamber of the 6 stars, the meeting finally kicks off, and you can practically feel the suffocating tension in the air. Comet pipes up, asking if dealing with the crisis is just code for a straight-up assassination. Arch shuts him down fast, reminding everyone that despite Krenelson's crimes, he's still one of them. So they're bringing him in alive. No excuses. Archbishop Icres cuts through the tension with a cold glare, even as Comet keeps pushing the idea that this mission is nothing more than a hit job. He barks that being that sentimental is a straight-up death sentence. He cold-bloodedly explains that whether Krenelson or his deacon live or die doesn't matter, as long as the church gets what it wants. Arch is left completely speechless, paralyzed by Cress's sheer ruthlessness. Comet grumbles that this mission sounds even more miserable than the embarrassing PR stunts they were stuck with before. Saul steps up, suggesting they start by gathering intel and offering to sneak into the area to scout things out. FIA cuts him off, pointing out that Saul sticks out way too much for undercover work, and suggests they leave the choice up to pure luck instead. She flicks 3 coins high into the air, snatches them back with total ease, and starts laying out the rules for every single person there. Everyone's got to call heads or tails for the gold, silver, and copper coins, but there's a catch. No 2 people can pick the same sequence. The coins soar through the air as everyone screams their bets. Fia goes tails, heads, heads. Arch locks in heads, tails, tails. Soul picks heads, tails, heads. Comet grabs tails, tails, heads. And Zest bets it all on a triple tails. The coins clatter to the ground, and the moment Fia slowly opens her palm, the tension is absolutely electric. Boom! It's 3 tails across the board. She erupts in cheers, crowning Zest the big loser who's now officially stuck with the mission. Zest doesn't even break a sweat, though. He just stands tall and makes his grand declaration. He brags that Lady Luck is on his side, and since good fortune is the ultimate weapon for this mission, he's charging in solo. Fia's losing it because this breaks every rule in the book. But Arch stays dead silent as Saul and Comet throw in their support. Finally, the crest wraps things up by praising Zess for letting his actions do the talking, and Zess gives a deep bow before heading out. Deep in the shadows outside the city walls, a lone carriage waits under the moonlight as a guard scans the manifest, confirming the passenger is a merchant named Lon before waving him aboard, and when they ask where he's headed, Zess, still hiding behind his alias Lon, casually tells them he's bound for the southwest. They're heading straight for the elven sanctuary hidden deep inside the World Tree Cave. Back in the elven realm, Amami is geeking out with Alec and Corona over his massive new discovery. He's hyped that Idale works as a perfect anesthetic, but he knows he can't just start dosing people without proving it's 100% safe. That means it's time for what he calls a clinical trial. He's pulling this move straight from the memories of his past life. To get a new drug on the streets, it's gotta survive a clinical trial. A high-stakes gauntlet where scientists track every side effect and dosage to see if it's actually better than the old stuff. The whole thing goes down in phases, starting with a handful of healthy volunteers before scaling up to massive groups of desperate patients. In Japan, they call this chicken, and it's the only way to score enough data to finally get that official government green light for medical use. Amami realizes he needs human test subjects to figure out the right dosage and reactions. But since volunteers are hard to come by, Alex suggests bringing in Shia, the resident expert on Itele, a move Amami loves because she can finally shed some light on the drug's nasty side effects. Feeling the fire, Alec pledges his total support for Amami's hospital project, leaving her stunned by his sudden burst of energy. He's already got Norman prepping the gear, and he's even ready to forge the surgical blades himself to make sure this dream becomes a reality. Then it hits him. He remembers a lady asking for a tool with a massive oversized blade. Amami knows those tools would be a total game changer, but she's terrified Alec is just going to end up hurting himself all over again. Alec just laughs off their worries, revealing he's using a legendary material called Spirit Silver so he doesn't have to spill any blood or use forbidden magic, leaving a confused mom asking what that even is while Alec just gives her a knowing smirk. Alec calls out Amami for being a total medical shut-in, but promises he's still got plenty of use. Then, before Amami can even blink, Alec grabs him by the arm to show him exactly what Spirit Silver is all about. He rockets into the sky with a massive leap, snatching Amami up while a panicked Corona screams for her master as they vanish into the blue.